Lucas Bennett's hands trembled on the steering wheel as he watched his ex-girlfriend step out of a silver sedan across the parking lot. 2 years of carefully rebuilt dignity threatened to crumble in seconds. The woman who'd shattered his world was walking straight toward the reunion and toward him. Beside him sat Victoria Hale, his CEO boss, pretending to be his girlfriend for one desperate afternoon. "Ready?" she whispered. Lucas's throat went dry. Ready? He wasn't ready for any of this. But before he could answer, Victoria's hand found his, her touch unexpectedly steady, and everything changed. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name. I love seeing how far these tales travel around the world. Now, let's dive into Lucas's story from the beginning. The late August sun hung heavy over the winding back roads of Sullivan County, New York, casting long shadows through the towering pines that lined Route 97. Lucas Bennett's pickup truck, a 2008 Silverado with more rust than paint, rattled along the cracked asphalt, its engine making that concerning knocking sound it had developed 3 weeks ago. He'd meant to fix it. He'd meant to do a lot of things. Instead, he'd spent his Saturday morning ironing a shirt he hadn't worn in 2 years, rehearsing conversations in his bathroom mirror like some lovesick teenager, and second-guessing every decision that had led him to this moment. In the passenger seat, Victoria Hale sat with the kind of composed elegance that seemed utterly incongruous with the truck's worn interior. She wore a simple cream-colored sundress with delicate floral patterns, nothing like the sharp blazers and pencil skirts Lucas was accustomed to seeing her in at Hale Construction's corporate office. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She looked different, human almost. Not the untouchable CEO who'd built a construction empire from the ground up, but just a woman enjoying a late summer drive. "You're going to wear a hole through that steering wheel," Victoria said, her voice cutting through Lucas's spiraling thoughts. She didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape of rolling hills and weathered barns. "Your knuckles have been white since we left the highway." Lucas forced himself to loosen his grip. "Sorry, I'm just second-guessing everything?" Victoria turned to face him now, one eyebrow raised in that signature expression that had intimidated countless contractors and city officials. But her eyes held something softer. Amusement, maybe. Or understanding. "Because if you want to turn around, we can. I've got about 15 things I should be doing at the office anyway." "No." The word came out too quickly, too desperate. Lucas cleared his throat. "No, I appreciate you doing this. I know it's weird." "Weird is one word for it." Victoria's lips curved into a slight smile. "When my site manager asked me to pretend to be his girlfriend at his ex's reunion, I'll admit that wasn't on my bingo card for the week." Lucas felt heat creep up his neck. When he'd approached Victoria in her office 3 days ago, the request had sounded insane even to his own ears. But desperation did strange things to a man's judgment. He could still remember standing in her doorway, hard hat in hand, trying to find the words. Victoria had been reviewing blueprints for the new hospital wing project, her reading glasses perched on her nose, looking every bit the formidable businesswoman who'd taken her father's struggling construction company and transformed it into one of the most respected firms in the tri-state area. "Mr. Bennett," she'd said without looking up, "if this is about the Henderson project timeline, I've already allocated the additional crew members you requested." "It's not about work." The words had tumbled out before Lucas could stop them. "It's personal and completely inappropriate, and I'm sorry for even bringing it to you, but I don't know who else to ask." That had gotten her attention. Victoria had removed her glasses, set down her pen, and given him that penetrating stare that made most people confess their deepest secrets. "I'm listening." And somehow, impossibly, Lucas had told her everything. About Olivia Hart, the woman he'd planned to marry 5 years ago. About their daughter, Emma, who died of leukemia at age 4, taking their relationship with her. About the 2 years of grief that had followed, the slow disintegration of their bond, the final bitter argument that had ended everything. About learning to be a father to his son Mason, Emma's younger brother, alone. About rebuilding his life one painful day at a time. And about the Facebook invitation that had arrived 2 weeks ago, announcing a reunion of their old college friend group. The same friend group where he'd met Olivia. The same people who'd watched their relationship bloom and die. Everyone's going to be there, Lucas had said, hating how pathetic he sounded. Everyone's going to see that that I haven't moved on, Victoria had supplied. Yeah. Victoria had been quiet for a long moment, tapping one manicured nail against her desk, a habit Lucas had learned meant she was thinking. Finally, she'd leaned back in her chair. So you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Make it look like you've got your life together. Show the ex that you're doing just fine without her. Lucas had nodded miserably. I know it's a lot to ask. If you say no, I completely understand, and we can pretend this conversation never. I'll do it. Lucas had actually stammered. You... What? I'll do it, Victoria had repeated, a strange gleam in her eye. But I have one condition. Anything. If I'm going to spend my Saturday afternoon playing pretend girlfriend to impress your ex, I want something in return. She'd stood up, walking around her desk with deliberate slowness. When it's all over, when we've successfully convinced everyone that Lucas Bennett has moved on with his life, I want a kiss. Lucas's brain had short-circuited. Kiss? Considerate payment for services rendered. Victoria's smile had been playful, almost mischievous, an expression Lucas had never seen on his boss's face. Unless that's too weird for you? It should have been weird. It should have been 1,000 kinds of inappropriate. But something in Victoria's tone suggested she was testing him, seeing if he'd back down. Deal, Lucas had said. Now, as they drove deeper into the rural landscape of his past, Lucas wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Not about asking Victoria that ship had sailed, but about coming to this reunion at all. Tell me about her. Victoria's voice pulled him back to the present. Olivia, what was she like? Lucas navigated a sharp curve, the truck's suspension groaning. Why do you want to know? Because if I'm going to be your girlfriend, I should probably know about the competition. Victoria shifted in her seat, tucking one leg beneath her in a casual gesture that seemed startlingly intimate in the truck's confined space. Plus, I'm curious, what kind of woman makes Lucas Bennett, one of the most level-headed, unflappable men I've ever worked with, this nervous? Olivia wasn't... Lucas struggled to find the right words. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. When we were in college, she was studying art history, wanted to work in museum curation. She saw beauty in everything, old buildings, broken things, people everyone else overlooked. She made the world feel bigger, somehow, more meaningful. And when your daughter got sick, Lucas's hands tightened on the wheel again. Emma's illness lasted 2 years. 2 years of hospitals and experimental treatments and hope that kept getting crushed. Olivia was strong through all of it. Stronger than me, honestly. She never broke down in front of Emma, never let our daughter see her fear. But, Victoria prompted gently, but after Emma died, Lucas exhaled slowly. It was like Olivia died too, or the version of her I'd known did. She couldn't look at Mason without seeing Emma, couldn't walk past Emma's room, couldn't stay in the house we'd made into a home. The grief consumed everything. And you? I had Mason. I had to keep going, had to be functional, had to make breakfast and pack lunches and pretend that life wasn't an endless nightmare. Lucas's voice cracked slightly. Olivia said I didn't understand what she was going through, said I'd moved on too fast, that I didn't really love Emma if I could just continue. That's not fair, Victoria said quietly. No, Lucas agreed, but grief isn't fair. And I think somewhere deep down, Olivia blamed me for not being able to save Emma, for not being able to save us. They drove in silence for several miles. The GPS announced they were 5 minutes from their destination, the Riverside Cafe, a converted barn that sat on the banks of the Delaware River. Lucas had been there years ago, back when life was simpler, when the future felt full of promise instead of landmines. For what it's worth, Victoria finally said, I think you're incredibly brave. Lucas nearly laughed. Brave? I'm asking my boss to fake a relationship because I'm too pathetic to face my ex alone. No. Victoria's voice carried steel now, the CEO tone that brooked no argument. You're a single father who's raised a child alone while dealing with unimaginable loss. You've shown up to work every day, managed complex construction projects, earned the respect of your crew. You've built a life from ruins, Lucas. That's not pathetic. That's courage. Lucas felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Thank you, he said softly. Don't thank me yet. Victoria smiled. We still have to pull off this charade. So here's the plan. We met 6 months ago through work. You impressed me with your leadership on the Morrison project. I asked you out for coffee, you said yes, and we've been seeing each other since. We keep it professional at work, but outside the office, we're a couple. That's actually a pretty good backstory. I didn't become a CEO by being unprepared. Victoria pulled down the sun visor, checking her reflection in the small mirror. How do I look? Appropriately girlfriend-like? Lucas allowed himself to really look at her for the first time. Victoria was 42, 8 years older than him, but she carried those years with a grace that made age seem irrelevant. Her features were refined without being delicate, her posture confident without being rigid. She was, Lucas realized with some surprise, genuinely beautiful. You look great, he said, then immediately felt awkward. I mean, you always look great, but relax, Lucas. Victoria laughed, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle she deployed in board meetings. Save the nervousness for when we get there. Right now, you need to breathe. The Riverside Cafe came into view around the next bend. It looked exactly as Lucas remembered, a sprawling converted barn painted deep red, with white trim and large windows that caught the afternoon light. Cars already filled the gravel parking lot. Lucas recognized several vehicles from college, now older and more worn, like their owners. His heart began to hammer. Okay, Victoria said, her hand finding his on the gear shift. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to park, we're going to walk in there together, and we're going to act like two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. Because honestly, we do. You're not just my employee, Lucas. You're someone I respect, someone I trust. So this isn't really pretending, is it? We're just emphasizing certain aspects of our relationship. Lucas pulled into a parking space near the back, away from the main cluster of vehicles. Through the cafe's windows, he could see people moving, gathering, laughing, his old life continuing without him. What if she asks questions? Lucas's voice was barely above a whisper. What if Olivia wants to know details, or, then we'll handle it, together? Victoria squeezed his hand. That's why I'm here, remember? You're not doing this alone. They sat for a moment in the truck's cab, engine ticking as it cooled, the sounds of laughter and music drifting across the parking lot. Lucas noticed Victoria hadn't let go of his hand. Her palm was warm, her grip steady. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Why did you really agree to this? It can't just be for a kiss. Victoria was quiet for several heartbeats. When she spoke, her voice carried an unfamiliar vulnerability. Because I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. To worry that everyone's judging the life you've built, finding it lacking. She turned to face him fully. I've spent 15 years proving myself in an industry that still thinks women should be secretaries, not CEOs. Every project is a test. Every decision is scrutinized. And sometimes, even now, I walk into a room and wonder if I belong there. I've never seen you doubt yourself, Lucas said honestly. That's because I'm very good at pretending. Victoria smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. So when you came to my office asking for help with your own performance, I understood. We all need someone in our corner sometimes, Lucas. Someone who sees us the way we wish we could see ourselves. Before Lucas could respond, a sharp rap on the driver's side window made them both jump. Lucas turned to see a face from his past grinning at him through the glass. Bennett, that really you, man? Marcus Webb. Linebacker in college, now running a successful insurance agency in Albany. Lucas had known him since freshman orientation. They'd been roommates for 3 years, had stood up in each other's weddings, had promised to stay close no matter what. They hadn't spoken in 18 months. Lucas rolled down the window, forcing a smile. Hey, Marcus. Dude, I was starting to think you weren't going to show. Marcus's grin was infectious, genuine. He was one of those people who seemed incapable of guile. Everyone's inside already. Olivia got here about 20 minutes ago, and he stopped, noticing Victoria for the first time. Oh, sorry, didn't realize you had company. Marcus, this is Victoria. Lucas glanced at her, trying to communicate everything with his eyes. My girlfriend. Victoria stepped out of the truck with practiced ease, extending her hand. Victoria Hale, it's wonderful to meet you. Lucas has told me so much about his college friends. Marcus shook her hand, his expression shifting from surprise to delight. No kidding. Lucas Bennett finally getting back out there? He leaned in conspiratorially, though his whisper was loud enough for half the parking lot to hear. Good for you, man. It's about time. Lucas climbed out of the truck, suddenly aware of how shabby his vehicle looked next to the newer SUVs and sedans surrounding them. He'd meant to clean it out, to at least remove the car seat and Mason's scattered toys from the back. But there was no hiding it now. This was his life, worn and imperfect. Victoria works in construction too, Lucas said, trying to establish their cover story. That's how we met. No way. You guys work together? Marcus's eyes widened. Wow, office romance. That's pretty cool. What do you do, Victoria? I'm in project management, Victoria said smoothly, the lie sliding out effortlessly. Mostly commercial developments. Lucas and I were assigned to the same project, and she glanced at Lucas with an expression that seemed almost genuine in its warmth. Well, he made quite an impression. I bet he did. Marcus clapped Lucas on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. Come on, everyone's dying to catch up. Beth brought her twin boys. They're absolute terrors, but hilarious. And Jason's got this whole story about accidentally joining a pyramid scheme that you have to hear. As they walked toward the cafe, Victoria slipped her hand into Lucas's. The gesture felt natural, unrehearsed, her fingers laced with his, and Lucas found himself drawing strength from the contact. The cafe's interior was exactly as Lucas remembered. Exposed wooden beams, Edison bulb lighting, mismatched vintage furniture that created a cozy, eclectic atmosphere. Long tables had been pushed together to accommodate the group, maybe 25 people total, all faces Lucas recognized from another lifetime. The moment he stepped through the door, the conversation shifted. Heads turned. Smiles formed, some genuine, some curious, some pitying. And there, at the far end of the room, sitting in a leather armchair with a glass of white wine, was Olivia Hart. She looked up. Their eyes met, and Lucas felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. Olivia hadn't changed much in 2 years. Her auburn hair was shorter now, cut in a sleek bob that framed her heart-shaped face. She'd always been slender, but she looked healthier now, less haunted. She wore a simple black dress that Lucas didn't recognize, nothing from their life together. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cafe's ambient noise seemed to fade, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of shared history and unspoken words. Then Olivia smiled, a small, sad smile that acknowledged everything they'd been and everything they'd lost, and raised her glass in a subtle salute. Lucas managed to nod in return. You okay? Victoria whispered, so quietly that only Lucas could hear. Yeah, Lucas lied. I'm fine. The next hour passed in a blur of reunions and small talk. Lucas found himself moving through the cafe mechanically, shaking hands, accepting hugs, introducing Victoria to people he'd once considered family. Everyone had questions. Where was he living now? How was Mason? Was he still in construction? And always, always the unspoken question hanging in the air. Are you okay? Really okay? Victoria navigated it all with remarkable grace. She knew exactly when to speak and when to let Lucas take the lead. She laughed at the right moments, asked intelligent questions, and somehow made it seem like she'd been part of this group for years. People gravitated toward her naturally, drawn by her confidence and warmth. She's great, Beth whispered to Lucas during a lull in conversation. Beth had been Olivia's college roommate, her maid of honor at the wedding that never happened. Lucas had always liked her, but their friendship had been collateral damage in the breakup. Seriously, Lucas, I'm happy for you. Thanks, Lucas managed. Olivia seems to be doing well too, Beth continued, oblivious to Lucas's discomfort. She's been seeing someone, a guy named David. He's a curator at a museum in Philadelphia. They met at a gallery opening 6 months ago. 6 months. The same time frame in Lucas and Victoria's fictional relationship. The parallel felt like too much coincidence, too much cosmic irony. That's good, Lucas said, surprised to find he meant it. She deserves to be happy. So do you. Beth squeezed his arm gently. Emma wouldn't want you stuck in the past, you know. None of us do. Before Lucas could respond, someone called Beth's name, and she moved away, leaving Lucas standing alone near the cafe's stone fireplace. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting patterns across the polished concrete floor. Outside, the Delaware River flowed past, indifferent to human drama. There you are. Victoria appeared at his elbow, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. You looked like you could use this. Lucas accepted the glass gratefully, downing half of it in one go. Sorry, I didn't mean to abandon you. You didn't. Victoria leaned against the fireplace's mantel, studying him with those keen eyes that seemed to see everything. But you looked like you were about to bolt, so I thought I'd better intervene before you made a run for the truck. That obvious? To me? Yes. To everyone else? No. You're doing fine, Lucas. Victoria glanced around the cafe, her gaze sharp and assessing. Your friends seem nice. A little intrusive with the questions, maybe, but they clearly care about you. They do, Lucas agreed. Or they did. I haven't been great at keeping in touch. That's understandable, given everything you've been through. Victoria set her glass down on the mantel. But I notice you haven't actually spoken to Olivia yet. Lucas's stomach clenched. I don't know what to say to her. How about hello? Victoria's tone was gentle but firm. Look, I know this is hard, but you came here to prove you've moved on, right? Hiding in corners and avoiding her isn't exactly sending that message. She was right, of course. Victoria was usually right about these things. It was what made her such an effective CEO. She saw the problem, identified the solution, and cut straight through any emotional noise to get to the heart of the matter. Okay, Lucas said. Okay, you're right. I just need to... Lucas! The voice came from directly behind him. Lucas turned to find Olivia standing there, her wine glass now empty, her expression cautiously friendly. Olivia. Lucas's voice came out steadier than he'd expected. Hi. Hi. Olivia's eyes flicked to Victoria, then back to Lucas. It's good to see you. You look well. Thanks. So do you. The words felt absurdly formal, like they were strangers making small talk at a networking event. This was the woman he'd planned to grow old with, whose hand he'd held through their daughter's last breath, and now they were reduced to pleasantries. I heard you brought someone, Olivia said, her tone carefully neutral. I'm glad. You shouldn't be alone. Before Lucas could figure out how to respond to that loaded statement, Victoria stepped forward, extending her hand with professional politeness. I'm Victoria Hale. You must be Olivia. Lucas has mentioned you. Olivia shook Victoria's hand, and Lucas watched something shift in her expression. Surprise, maybe? Or reassessment? He has. That's unexpected. Only good things, Victoria said smoothly. He's spoken very highly of your time together. The statement was diplomatic, kind even, and it seemed to catch Olivia off guard. Her shoulders, which had been tense, relaxed slightly. Well, Olivia said, I'm glad Lucas found someone who makes him happy. That's all I ever wanted for him. The 3 of them stood there for an awkward moment, the weight of unspoken history pressing down on them. Lucas could hear the cafe's background noise, conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses, but it all felt distant, muffled. How's Mason? Olivia asked quietly, and Lucas saw genuine concern in her eyes. Whatever had broken between them, Olivia had loved Mason once. Had been the closest thing to a mother he'd known in those early years. He's good, Lucas said, grateful for the safe topic. Growing like a weed, starting 2nd grade in a few weeks. He's obsessed with dinosaurs right now, can name about 50 different species. Emma would have loved that. Olivia's smile was bittersweet. She was always trying to teach him things, remember? Even when she could barely... Her voice trailed off, but they all knew where the sentence ended. Even when she could barely stay awake. Even when every movement hurt. Even when they all knew she was dying. She would have been so proud of him, Lucas said softly. Of the kid he's becoming. Olivia nodded, blinking rapidly. I should go check on David. He's around here somewhere, probably boring someone with museum talk. She attempted a laugh that didn't quite land. It was good to see you, Lucas. Really. You too, Liv. The old nickname slipped out before Lucas could stop it, and he saw Olivia flinch slightly. But she recovered quickly, giving them both a small wave before disappearing into the crowd. Lucas exhaled slowly, realizing he'd been holding his breath. "That wasn't so bad?" Victoria observed. "No," Lucas agreed. "It wasn't." And it was true. The confrontation he'd been dreading, the emotional avalanche he'd expected, none of it had materialized. Instead, he'd had a brief, awkward, ultimately mundane conversation with someone who used to be the center of his universe. The past had lost its teeth. "I think," Victoria said, linking her arm through his, "we've earned some fresh air. Want to walk down to the river?" Lucas nodded gratefully, and they made their way through the cafe toward the back exit. Several people called out greetings as they passed, but Victoria deflected them with promises to return soon. The rear deck of the cafe overlooked the Delaware River, which moved in slow, glittering swirls beneath the late afternoon sun. A wooden staircase led down to a narrow beach where kayakers sometimes launched. Lucas and Victoria descended carefully, Victoria holding up her dress hem with one hand while keeping the other on Lucas's arm for balance. At the water's edge, they stood side by side, watching the river flow past. Across the water, the Pennsylvania mountains rose in hazy blue layers. "Thank you," Lucas said finally, "for all of this. For coming here, for playing along, for being exactly what I needed." Victoria turned to look at him, and something in her expression made Lucas's breath catch. She wasn't wearing her CEO mask anymore. No polite professionalism, no careful distance. Just Victoria, unguarded and real. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Something I probably shouldn't." "Of course." "When you came to my office and asked me to do this, I said yes for selfish reasons." Victoria looked back at the river, her profile outlined against the sparkling water. "I told you that story about understanding what it's like to feel judged, and that was true. But there was more to it." Lucas waited, sensing she needed time to find the words. "I've been watching you for months, Lucas. The way you handle your crew, the way you solve problems, the way you always put Mason first, even when it means leaving early or missing site meetings." Victoria's voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. "I've been attracted to you for a long time, but I'm your boss, and you've been through hell, and it seemed wrong to even think about it." Lucas's heart began to pound for entirely different reasons than it had all day. "Victoria, let me finish." She held up one hand. "When you asked me to pretend to be your girlfriend, I thought, maybe this is my chance. Maybe in playing this role I could show you that we work well together. That I see you not as an employee, but as a man I genuinely admire and care about." "You could have just asked me to coffee," Lucas said, his voice rough. Victoria laughed, and it sounded almost nervous, an emotion Lucas had never associated with her. "Could I? You've been so locked in your grief, so focused on just surviving each day. Would you have even noticed if I'd asked?" Lucas thought about it honestly. 6 months ago? A year ago? Probably not. He'd been functioning on autopilot, moving through each day with mechanical precision. Work, Mason, sleep, repeat. The idea of romance, of opening himself up to someone new, had seemed impossible. But somewhere along the way, without realizing it, things had shifted. Mason had started asking about why other kids had moms, and he didn't. Lucas had found himself lingering over couples in the park, wondering what it might be like to have a partner again. The grief hadn't disappeared, would never disappear, but it had transformed into something he could carry instead of something that carried him. "I might have noticed," Lucas said quietly. "Eventually." "Eventually isn't good enough for me." Victoria turned to face him fully, and Lucas saw determination in her eyes, the same quality that had built a construction empire. "I want you to notice now, Lucas. I want you to see that what we have, this trust, this understanding, this connection, it's real. The pretending is just an excuse to show you what's already there." Lucas's mind was racing. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a simple favor, a business arrangement with a playful payment at the end. But Victoria was right. There was something between them. He'd felt it in the truck, in the way her hand steadied him. He'd felt it watching her move through the cafe, fitting seamlessly into his old life while remaining uniquely herself. "I don't know if I'm ready," Lucas admitted. "For something real. I've got Mason to think about, and my life is complicated, and I know, Victoria interrupted gently. I'm not asking for forever, Lucas. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility, to see me as more than your boss, to maybe, when you're ready, let me in. Before Lucas could respond, voices drifted down from the cafe deck. Their moment of privacy was ending. We should get back, Victoria said, but she didn't move. Before they send out a search party. Victoria? Lucas caught her hand as she turned. That kiss you asked for, when this is all over? What about it? I think I'd like it to mean something, not just payment for a favor. Victoria's smile was brilliant, transforming her entire face. I think I'd like that too. They climbed back up to the cafe together, and Lucas realized something had fundamentally changed. He wasn't pretending anymore. The act had become real somewhere between the parking lot and the riverbank, between awkward reunions and honest confessions. The rest of the reunion passed in a comfortable blur. Lucas and Victoria mingled with the group, sharing stories and laughter. Olivia and her new boyfriend David kept their distance, which Lucas appreciated. There was no drama, no tearful confrontations, no revisiting of old wounds. Instead, there was just life, messy and imperfect, and moving forward. As the sun began to set, painting the cafe's windows in shades of amber and gold, people started saying their goodbyes. Promises to stay in touch were made, though Lucas suspected most would fade like they had before. That was okay. Some friendships were meant for specific seasons of life. Marcus cornered Lucas near the exit, pulling him into a bear hug. I'm really glad you came, man, and I'm glad you found Victoria. She's special. She is, Lucas agreed, meaning it more than Marcus could know. Hey, we should get the guys together sometime. Maybe bring Mason to a Yankees game or something. I know I haven't been great about keeping in touch, but I miss you, man. You're my brother. Lucas felt his throat tighten. I'd like that. In the parking lot, Victoria waited by the truck while Lucas made his final rounds. When he finally joined her, the last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky. Ready to go? She asked. Lucas glanced back at the cafe one final time. Through the lit windows, he could see Olivia laughing at something David said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. She looked happy, free, and Lucas realized he felt the same way. Yeah, he said, opening the truck door for Victoria. I'm ready. The drive back was quieter than the drive up, but it was a comfortable silence. Victoria had slipped off her shoes and tucked her feet beneath her, looking more relaxed than Lucas had ever seen her. His hand rested on the center console, and halfway through the drive, Victoria's hand found his again. They didn't talk much. There would be time for conversations later, about what this meant, about how to navigate a relationship between a boss and employee, about introducing Victoria to Mason, about all the complicated realities that came with moving forward. But for now, they just drove through the darkening countryside, two people who'd started the day pretending and ended it, discovering something real. As they crossed back into the city limits, Victoria finally spoke. So, about that kiss. Lucas smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. I thought we agreed it should mean something. We did. I'm just wondering when you plan to deliver on that particular promise. Patience, Ms. Hale, Lucas said, channeling her CEO tone. Good things come to those who wait. I've never been very good at patience. I've noticed. Victoria laughed, and the sound filled the truck's cab with warmth. When Lucas pulled up to her apartment building, a renovated historic warehouse in the city's downtown district, he put the truck in park but left the engine running. Thank you, he said again, for everything today. Stop thanking me. Victoria gathered her purse and shoes. You did all the hard work. I just stood there and looked pretty. You did more than that. Victoria paused, her hand on the door handle. Lucas, for what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. Better than okay. You've already survived the worst thing that can happen to a person. Everything else is just details. She leaned across the console and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Not the payment they joked about, but something softer, a promise of possibilities. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Victoria. Lucas waited until she was safely inside her building before pulling away. The drive to his own apartment, a modest two-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, took 20 minutes. Mason would be asleep already. Lucas's mom was watching him for the night and had texted earlier to confirm bedtime had gone smoothly. But Lucas wasn't ready to go home yet. Instead, he drove to Riverside Park, a small green space near his apartment where he sometimes brought Mason to play. He parked in the empty lot and walked to his favorite bench, the one that overlooked the children's playground. Emma had loved this park. Before she got sick, Lucas had brought both kids here nearly every weekend. He could still see her on the swings, her thin legs pumping as she tried to go higher, her laughter carrying across the playground. The memory didn't hurt the way it used to. It was still sad, still touched with grief, but there was sweetness there too. Love didn't die just because the person did. Emma lived on in every good thing Lucas did for Mason, in every choice to keep moving forward, in every moment he chose hope over despair. "I met someone, Em," Lucas said quietly to the empty playground. "Her name's Victoria, and I think you'd like her. She's strong like Mommy was, but different. She sees me, you know? Not just the broken parts." A breeze rustled through the park's trees, carrying the scent of late summer. "I'm going to be okay," Lucas continued. "Mason's going to be okay. We're going to have a good life, kiddo, I promise." He sat there for a long time, watching the stars emerge one by one above the city, and for the first time in years, Lucas felt something he'd almost forgotten, genuine, uncomplicated hope for the future. When he finally went home, his mother was waiting in the living room, reading a mystery novel. "How was it?" she asked, looking up as Lucas entered. "It was good, Mom. Really good." She studied his face, and whatever she saw there made her smile. "I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserve some happiness." After his mother left, Lucas checked on Mason. His son was sprawled across his twin bed, one arm hanging off the edge, his dinosaur nightlight casting friendly shadows on the walls. Lucas pulled the blanket up over Mason's shoulders and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Love you, buddy," he whispered. In his own room, Lucas's phone buzzed with a text message. "Victoria. Made it home safely. Thank you for today. I know it wasn't easy." Lucas typed back, "Thank you for making it possible. Dinner sometime this week? For real this time?" The response came almost immediately. "I thought you'd never ask. Tuesday work? I know a place that has excellent pasta and a kid's menu." Lucas smiled. She was already thinking about Mason, already considering his whole life, not just the parts that involved her. That mattered more than Victoria probably knew. "Tuesday's perfect," he typed back. "Fair warning, Mason's going to ask a million questions." "Good. I like curious kids. See you Monday at work, Mr. Bennett. Try not to stare at me inappropriately during the budget meeting." "No promises, Ms. Hale." Lucas set his phone down and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd wake up and make Mason pancakes. They'd go to the park, maybe stop by the library for new dinosaur books. Normal, everyday things that made up a life. But underneath that normalcy, something had shifted. The wall Lucas had built around his heart, constructed from grief and fear and the certainty that he'd already had his chance at love, had developed a crack. And through that crack, light was beginning to pour in. Monday morning arrived with the kind of humid heat that made the city feel like it was wrapped in wet cotton. Lucas pulled into the Hale construction parking lot at 6:30, earlier than usual, his coffee already half finished. The site trailer for the Morrison project sat at the far end of the lot, and Lucas could see lights already on inside. His crew would start arriving around 7, but Lucas had always preferred these quiet morning hours when he could review the day's plans without interruption. He was halfway across the parking lot when he noticed Victoria's Mercedes in its reserved spot near the main office building. She was here early too. Lucas's stomach did an unexpected flip at the thought of seeing her. They'd texted a few times over the weekend, light, easy messages about Mason's successful battle against broccoli at dinner, Victoria's struggle to assemble new office furniture. The kind of mundane details that somehow felt significant when shared with the right person. But texting was different from standing face-to-face in the place where she was his boss, and he was just another employee on the payroll. Lucas pushed open the trailer door to find his assistant foreman, Ray Martinez, already inside and scowling at a set of blueprints spread across the desk. "Please tell me you see what I'm seeing," Ray said without looking up. "Because if I'm having a stroke, I'd like to know now." Lucas set his coffee down and leaned over the plans. "The electrical conduit measurements? They don't match the structural drawings, not even close." Ray ran a hand through his graying hair. "We've got a 3-inch discrepancy that's going to put the main panel right through a load-bearing column." "Perfect." Lucas grabbed his phone. "I'll call the engineering firm. We need revised plans before the electrical crew gets here on Wednesday. Already tried. Got voicemail. Ray straightened up, his back cracking audibly. You know what this means, right? We're going to have to kick this upstairs. Get Ms. Hale involved. Lucas felt that flip in his stomach again. I'll handle it. Ray gave him an odd look. You feeling okay? You look different. Different how? I don't know. Less like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ray gathered up the blueprints. Good weekend? Yeah, Lucas said, and he couldn't quite suppress the smile. Actually, yeah, it was really good. Well, look at that. Lucas Bennett smiling on a Monday morning. Someone marked the calendar. Ray headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, boss, I'm glad. You've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for too long. It's nice to see you a little lighter. After Ray left, Lucas sat at his desk and stared at his phone. He needed to call Victoria about the blueprint issue. That was just work, completely professional, but the thought of hearing her voice made him feel like a teenager working up the courage to call his crush. This was ridiculous. He was 34 years old, a construction site manager, a father. He'd faced down union negotiations and safety inspections and the death of his daughter. He could handle a phone call to his boss, who he'd almost kissed by the river 2 days ago, who he was taking to dinner tomorrow night, who'd held his hand through the hardest afternoon he'd faced in years. Lucas was still staring at his phone when it buzzed with an incoming text from Victoria. Blueprint issue on Morrison project. Ray's voicemail was colorful. Come to my office when you have a minute. Lucas smiled despite himself. Of course, she was already 3 steps ahead. The main office building was a renovated brick warehouse that Victoria had purchased 5 years ago when Hale Construction started expanding beyond residential work. The ground floor housed the reception area and conference rooms, while the second floor contained the executive offices. Victoria's corner office had windows overlooking both the construction yard and the city skyline beyond. Lucas had been in that office dozens of times for project meetings and reviews, but walking down the hallway now felt different. Everything felt different. Victoria's assistant, Margaret, a formidable woman in her 60s who'd been with the company since Victoria's father ran it, looked up as Lucas approached. She's expecting you, Margaret said, her tone neutral. But there was something in her eyes, a knowing glint that made Lucas wonder exactly how much Victoria had told her about the weekend. Go on in. Lucas knocked once and pushed open the door. Victoria sat behind her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, 3 different monitors displaying spreadsheets and project schedules. She wore a charcoal gray suit with a white blouse, her hair pulled back in that severe bun, every inch the corporate CEO. But when she looked up and saw Lucas, her expression softened for just a moment, a brief crack in the professional armor. Mr. Bennett, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. We have a problem. Lucas sat, and they spent the next 20 minutes discussing the blueprint discrepancy, possible solutions, and the cost implications of each option. It was completely professional, perfectly normal, exactly how dozens of their previous meetings had gone. Except Lucas kept noticing small things he'd never paid attention to before. The way Victoria's fingers drummed against her desk when she was thinking. The small scar on her left eyebrow that was only visible when the light hit her face at certain angles. The fact that she'd switched from coffee to tea at some point, and the mug on her desk had a silly cartoon cat on it that seemed at odds with everything else in her carefully curated office. Lucas? Victoria's voice pulled him back. Did you hear my question? Sorry, what? I asked if you thought we could absorb the delay if we push the electrical work back a week and accelerate the drywall installation. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him with an expression that was part amusement, part exasperation. Where did you go just now? Nowhere. Just thinking. About the project? Not exactly. Lucas met her eyes. About how weird this is. Weird? Sitting here talking about load-bearing columns when 2 days ago you told me you'd been attracted to me for months. The words came out before Lucas could stop them. Sorry, that was inappropriate. We're at work. I shouldn't have... It's okay, Victoria interrupted. You're right. It is weird. I've been thinking the same thing all morning. She removed her glasses and set them on the desk. Which is why we need to establish some ground rules. Lucas nodded. Makes sense. At work, we maintain complete professionalism. You're my site manager, I'm your boss. No special treatment, no conflicts of interest, no perception of impropriety. We keep our personal life completely separate from our professional life. Agreed. Outside of work, Victoria's expression shifted, became less guarded. Outside of work, we see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. What about Mason? Lucas asked. He's part of the package deal. If this goes anywhere, he has to be comfortable with you. I know. Which is why tomorrow night I thought we could do something casual. Maybe pizza. Somewhere with video games or an arcade, something that takes the pressure off everyone. Victoria smiled. I may not have kids, but I remember being 7. Making it fun matters more than making it fancy. Lucas felt something warm expand in his chest. She'd really thought this through. Considered not just him, but Mason's needs too. He'll like you, Lucas said. How do you know? Because I do. The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest. Victoria's expression softened even further, and for a moment Lucas thought she might say something significant, something that would change the careful professional distance they were trying to maintain. Instead, she cleared her throat and picked up her glasses. The engineering firm should have revised plans by Wednesday. I'll personally review them before they go to your crew. Thank you, Ms. Hale. You're welcome, Mr. Bennett. Victoria's eyes held a glimmer of mischief. Now get back to work. I don't pay you to sit around my office all morning. Lucas stood, fighting a smile. As he reached the door, Victoria called out, Lucas? He turned back. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night, to meeting Mason. Me too. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of work, coordinating deliveries, reviewing safety protocols with the crew, troubleshooting a drainage issue that Ray discovered in the foundation's northeast corner. But underneath all the mundane construction site chaos, Lucas felt a current of anticipation running through him like electricity. That evening, after picking Mason up from his after-school program and making spaghetti for dinner, Lucas found himself in unfamiliar territory, trying to explain to his 7-year-old son that they'd be having dinner with someone special tomorrow night. Mason sat at the kitchen table twirling pasta around his fork with intense concentration. He'd inherited Lucas's dark hair but had his mother's delicate features, a combination that sometimes made Lucas's heart ache with complicated emotions. Buddy, Lucas said, sitting down across from him, I want to talk to you about something. Mason looked up, immediately suspicious. In his experience, conversations that started with I want to talk to you about something usually meant vegetables were involved. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. Lucas pushed his own plate aside. Remember how I went to that reunion this weekend with my old friends from college? Uh-huh. Grammy said you had a date. Well, Lucas made a mental note to have a conversation with his mother about discretion. Well, not exactly a date, but I did bring a friend. Her name is Victoria, and she's someone I like spending time with. Like a girlfriend? Mason's eyes widened. Are you going to get married? Whoa, slow down. No one's getting married. Lucas reached across and stole one of Mason's meatballs, earning a giggle. But Victoria is someone I'd like you to meet. I thought maybe tomorrow we could all have dinner together. Maybe go to that pizza place you love, the one with the racing games? Mason was quiet for a moment, his young mind processing this information. Is she nice? Very nice. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know, but I bet she'd love to hear about them from an expert like you. Will she be like a mom? The question was asked quietly, tentatively, and it hit Lucas square in the chest. Lucas chose his words carefully. She'd be my friend. Someone I care about. If you like her and she becomes part of our life, she'd be someone who cares about you too. But no one's trying to replace your mom, Mason. No one could do that. Mason thought about this while finishing his spaghetti. Finally, he asked, What if I don't like her? Then we'll figure it out together. But I think you will. And if you don't feel comfortable or you want to leave, just tell me. This is our decision, buddy. You and me. Okay. Mason nodded, then returned to the truly important question. Can I get extra tokens for the racing games? Lucas laughed, relief washing through him. We'll see. That night, after Mason was asleep, Lucas found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, standing in front of his closet trying to decide what to wear. To a pizza place, with his 7-year-old son. This was absurd. His phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Lucas answered. Hey yourself. Victoria's voice sounded different over the phone. Warmer, less polished. I'm calling because I'm currently standing in my closet having a minor crisis about what one wears to a children's pizza arcade, and I thought you might find my panic amusing. Lucas laughed. I was literally just doing the same thing. Oh, really? The construction site manager who faces down building inspectors and union reps is worried about fashion choices? When it involves my kid meeting someone I care about? Yeah, I'm a little nervous. Someone you care about? Victoria's voice held a smile. That's sweet. Don't let it go to your head, Ms. Hale. Too late. There was a pause then Victoria said more seriously, I'm nervous too, you know. I want Mason to like me. Kids can sense when someone's faking it, and I don't want to be just some random woman who showed up and disrupted his routine. You won't be, Lucas assured her. Just be yourself. That's all anyone can ask. What if myself is too corporate, too serious? I've spent 15 years learning how to command a boardroom, not how to talk to a 7-year-old about dinosaurs. Then you'll learn. Mason's a good teacher. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed. Besides, I've seen you handle million-dollar negotiations. I think you can manage a conversation about velociraptors. Victoria laughed, and Lucas loved the sound of it. Okay, you're right. I can do this. We can do this, Lucas corrected. We can do this, Victoria repeated. Together. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. Victoria's battle with her home Wi-Fi, Mason's latest playground adventure, the weather forecast. Normal, easy conversation that felt anything but normal to Lucas. This was what relationships looked like, he realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but simple connection at the end of a long day. When they finally said goodnight, Lucas lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how his life had shifted so dramatically in just a few days. Last week, the idea of dating anyone, let alone his boss, would have seemed impossible. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Tuesday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every hour felt like 3. Lucas caught himself checking the time so often that Ray finally asked if he had somewhere important to be. Meeting someone after work? Lucas said, trying to sound casual. Must be some meeting. You've been wound up like a spring all day. Ray grinned. Same person who had you smiling yesterday? Maybe. Good for you, man. Really. Ray clapped him on the shoulder. Whoever she is, she's lucky. At precisely 5 o'clock, Lucas left the site and drove to pick up Mason from his after-school program. They went home to change. Mason insisted on wearing his favorite dinosaur t-shirt, declaring that if this Victoria person didn't appreciate tyrannosaurs, she wasn't worth knowing, and then headed to Pizza Paradise, the arcade restaurant that was Mason's favorite place in the world. Victoria was already there, waiting in the parking lot. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a simple blue sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. Her hair was down again, catching the early evening light. Lucas parked and turned to Mason, who was staring at Victoria through the window with wide eyes. Ready, buddy? She's pretty, Mason whispered. Yeah, Lucas agreed. She is. Come on. They climbed out of the truck, and Lucas made the introductions with a nervousness that felt entirely out of proportion to the situation. Victoria, this is Mason. Mason, this is Victoria. Victoria crouched down to Mason's eye level, a gesture Lucas immediately appreciated. Hi, Mason. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He says you're the world's expert on dinosaurs. Mason's initial shyness evaporated. I know 53 different species. Do you want to know my favorite? Absolutely. Ankylosaurus, because it had armor plates and a clubbed tail, and it could defend itself from predators even though it was a herbivore. Most people think herbivores are weak, but Ankylosaurus proves that's not true. Victoria nodded seriously, as if Mason had just presented a compelling business case. That's an excellent choice. I've always respected the Ankylosaurus. Good defense strategy. Mason beamed, and just like that, Lucas knew everything was going to be okay. Inside Pizza Paradise, chaos reigned. Children ran between arcade games, ticket machines beeped and flashed, and the smell of pizza and popcorn filled the air. They ordered at the counter a large pepperoni pizza, breadsticks, and sodas, then grabbed a table near the racing games. So, Victoria said as they waited for their food, your dad tells me you're starting second grade soon. Are you excited? Mason shrugged in that universal way of children asked about school. I guess. My teacher is Mr. Rodriguez. He's supposed to be really nice. What's your favorite subject? Science. We get to do experiments and stuff. Mason's eyes lit up. Last year we made volcanoes that actually erupted. It was awesome. I loved science too when I was your age, Victoria said. I used to drive my parents crazy doing experiments in the kitchen. Once I tried to make slime and it ended up all over the ceiling. Mason giggled. Did you get in trouble? So much trouble. I had to clean the entire kitchen. Took 3 hours. Lucas watched this exchange with something warm unfurling in his chest. Victoria wasn't talking down to Mason or being artificially enthusiastic. She was just talking to him, treating him like a person worthy of real conversation. Their pizza arrived, and Mason immediately claimed 2 slices. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Mason told Victoria about his best friend Tyler, about his pet fish named Captain Bubbles, about his dream of becoming a paleontologist when he grew up. That's a great dream, Victoria said. You know, if you become a paleontologist, you could discover new dinosaur species. They'd name them after you. Really? Mason's eyes went huge. Absolutely. There's a dinosaur called Bambiraptor because the scientist who found it thought it looked like the deer from the movie, so you could have a Masonsaurus or a Bonetosaurus. That would be so cool. Mason turned to Lucas. Dad, did you hear that? I could have a dinosaur named after me. I heard, buddy. Better start studying hard. After they finished eating, Mason dragged them to the arcade section. He showed Victoria how to play the racing game, patiently explaining the controls and the best strategy for winning. Victoria proved surprisingly competitive, leaning into the turns and laughing when she crashed into a barrier. This is harder than it looks, she said as the game ended with Mason's car in first place and hers in fourth. You just need practice, Mason said generously. Dad's terrible at it too. Thanks, buddy, Lucas said dryly. They spent the next hour moving between games. Victoria turned out to be excellent at skee-ball, racking up an impressive number of tickets. Mason loved the zombie shooting game, though Lucas had to lift him up so he could reach the gun. And Lucas dominated at air hockey, much to Victoria's competitive dismay. At one point, while Mason was engrossed in a dinosaur-themed claw machine, Victoria leaned close to Lucas. He's wonderful, she said quietly. You've done an amazing job with him. Thanks. He's a good kid. He's more than good. He's kind, smart, curious. Victoria watched Mason carefully position the claw over a stuffed triceratops. You should be proud. I am. Every day. Mason managed to snag the triceratops on his 3rd try, emerging from the machine triumphant. Look, I got it. That's awesome, buddy, Lucas said. Mason studied the stuffed dinosaur for a moment, then walked over to Victoria and held it out. You can have it, since you helped me win tickets at skee-ball. Victoria looked genuinely touched. Are you sure you worked hard for that? I'm sure. Besides, I have a lot of dinosaurs at home. You probably don't have any. You're right, I don't. Victoria accepted the toy with the same seriousness she might accept a contract. Thank you, Mason. I'll treasure it. By the time they left Pizza Paradise, the sun had set and Mason was starting to drag. He'd used up all his energy on games and pizza, and now the inevitable crash was approaching. In the parking lot, Victoria knelt down again to say goodbye. I had a really fun time tonight, Mason. Thanks for teaching me about dinosaurs and racing games. You're welcome. Mason yawned hugely. Are you going to come over again? Victoria glanced at Lucas, who gave a small nod. I'd like that, if it's okay with you. It's okay with me. You're nice, and you're not bad at skee-ball. High praise, Victoria said solemnly. Lucas walked Victoria to her car while Mason waited in the truck, already half asleep. That went well, Victoria said, clutching the stuffed triceratops. Better than well. He liked you. Really liked you. The feeling is mutual. Victoria looked back at the truck where Mason's head was already nodding against the window. He's been through so much, Lucas. Losing his sister, his mother leaving, and he's still so full of life and curiosity. That's because of you. I just try to give him stability, love, a normal childhood. That's not a small thing. Victoria shifted the dinosaur to her other arm. My father worked constantly when I was growing up. I barely saw him. When he died, I inherited his company, but I'd hardly known him. You're giving Mason something infinitely more valuable than money or success. You're giving him yourself. Lucas felt his throat tighten. I'm just doing my best. Your best is pretty damn good. Victoria rose up on her toes and kissed his cheek, her lips soft and warm. Thank you for tonight, for letting me into your life, both your lives. Thank you for coming, for being... Lucas struggled to find the right word. For being you. Who else would I be? Victoria smiled. See you tomorrow, Mr. Bennett. See you tomorrow, Miss Hale. Lucas watched her drive away, then climbed into his truck where Mason was now fully asleep, his mouth slightly open, one hand curled against his chest. Lucas drove home carefully, not wanting to wake him, thinking about how strange and wonderful life could be. When he carried Mason inside and tucked him into bed, his son stirred slightly. Dad? Mason mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, buddy? I like her. Victoria. She's nice. I'm glad. Do you like her? Lucas brushed hair off Mason's forehead. Yeah, I really do. Good. Mason yawned again. She needs more dinosaurs, though. Just one isn't enough. Lucas smiled in the darkness. We'll work on that. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. At work, Lucas and Victoria maintained strict professionalism. They had project meetings, discussed budgets and timelines, and navigated the usual construction site dramas. But underneath the professional facade, there was a new current of understanding. Shared glances across conference tables, small smiles when no one else was looking. The knowledge that they had something private and precious that existed outside these walls. Outside of work, they slowly built something real. Victoria came to dinner at Lucas's apartment twice more, helping Mason with his science homework, and proving surprisingly adept at grilled cheese sandwiches. Lucas took Victoria to his favorite coffee shop on a rare Saturday morning when Mason was with his grandmother, and they spent 2 hours just talking about everything and nothing. They were careful, cautious, both aware of how much was at stake, but with each passing day, the foundation grew stronger. 3 weeks after the reunion, Victoria invited Lucas and Mason to her apartment for dinner. She'd promised to cook, though she'd warned that her culinary skills were limited, and Mason was excited to see where she lived. Victoria's apartment was on the top floor of the converted warehouse, with high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was decorated with the same attention to detail she brought to everything: modern furniture mixed with vintage pieces, artwork that looked expensive but not pretentious, and surprisingly, several plants that appeared to be thriving. Wow, Mason breathed, immediately running to the windows. You can see everything from up here. Pretty cool, right? Victoria appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron that said, I followed my heart and it led to the fridge. I moved here 5 years ago, and I still sometimes just stand at those windows watching the city. Can I look around? Mason asked, already moving toward a hallway. Go ahead, Victoria said. Just be careful around the... A crash echoed from down the hall, followed by Mason's voice. I'm okay. Victoria and Lucas looked at each other and burst out laughing. That's normal, Lucas said. He's like a small tornado. I noticed. Come on, let's make sure he hasn't destroyed anything valuable. They found Mason in Victoria's home office, standing in front of a knocked-over stack of architecture magazines. He was staring at something on her desk with wide eyes. You have a 3D printer. Mason pointed at the device in the corner. That's so cool. What do you make with it? Mostly boring work stuff, Victoria said, helping Mason pick up the magazines. Miniature building models for client presentations. But sometimes I make fun things too. See that dragon on the bookshelf? I made that. Mason's eyes got even wider. Could you make a dinosaur? Probably. I'd need the right file. There are free dinosaur files online, Mason said immediately, his encyclopedic knowledge of all things dinosaur coming into play. Dad lets me look at them sometimes. There's a really good Stegosaurus model that looks super realistic. Well, Victoria said, catching Lucas's eye over Mason's head, maybe we could work on that together sometime. You could pick the dinosaur, I'll print it, and we can paint it. Really? That would be awesome. Mason was practically vibrating with excitement. They made their way back to the kitchen where Victoria had attempted pasta carbonara. The noodles were slightly overcooked and the sauce was a bit thin, but it was edible and made with obvious care. This is pretty good, Mason said diplomatically, in the way of children who'd been taught good manners. You don't have to lie, Victoria laughed. I know it's not great. Cooking isn't exactly my strong suit. It's better than Dad's cooking, Mason said. He makes spaghetti every Tuesday, and it's always the same. Hey, Lucas protested, you love my spaghetti. I love all spaghetti. That doesn't mean yours is special. Victoria nearly choked on her water, trying not to laugh. Mason Bennett, diplomat in training. After dinner, while Victoria and Lucas cleaned up the kitchen, Mason curled up on her couch with a book about marine dinosaurs he'd brought from home. The domestic scene felt surreal to Lucas, his son comfortable in Victoria's space, the three of them moving around each other with easy familiarity. He's going to fall asleep on your couch, Lucas said, loading the dishwasher. Fair warning. That's fine. He looks comfortable. But Victoria dried a plate, studying Lucas. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are we moving too fast with Mason, I mean? I don't want to confuse him or make him think this is more serious than... She paused. Actually, scratch that. How serious is this, Lucas? Because I need to know what we're doing here. Lucas turned off the water and faced her fully. It was a fair question, one he'd been asking himself. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. The last time I dated anyone, I was 23 years old and thought I had my whole life figured out. Now I've got a kid, a complicated past, and about 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But, Victoria prompted, but when I'm with you, those reasons don't seem to matter as much. You make me want to try again, to believe that maybe there's room in my life for more than just survival. Lucas took a breath. I can't promise you forever, Victoria. I can't even promise you next month. What I can promise is that this is real for me. You're real for me. Victoria set down the dish towel and stepped closer. That's all I need to hear. Because it's real for me too, Lucas. Scary and complicated and probably a terrible idea for about 20 different professional reasons. But real. Lucas pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, the quiet intimacy meaning more than any grand gesture. From the living room came a soft, snoring sound. Mason had indeed fallen asleep, the book still open on his chest. I should probably get him home, Lucas said reluctantly, or you could stay a while longer. Let him sleep. We could talk. Watch a movie. Just be together without worrying about work or what comes next. Lucas looked at Victoria's face so close to his own and made a decision. Okay, let's stay. They moved to the living room, careful not to wake Mason. Victoria put on a classic movie, The Princess Bride, which Lucas hadn't seen in years, and they settled on the opposite end of the couch from where Mason slept. Halfway through the movie, Victoria's head found its way to Lucas's shoulder. His arm wrapped around her naturally, holding her close. This was what he'd forgotten in 2 years of just surviving, the simple comfort of physical closeness with someone who understood you. Lucas? Victoria whispered during the fire swamp scene. Yeah? I'm really glad you asked me to that reunion, even if it was for completely fake reasons. Best fake relationship I've ever had, Lucas said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Better be the only fake relationship you've ever had. That too. They finished the movie in comfortable silence. Around 10 o'clock, Lucas finally admitted they needed to leave. He carried Mason to the truck, his son barely stirring, just mumbling something about dinosaurs in his sleep, and Victoria walked them down to the parking garage. Thank you for tonight, Lucas said. For dinner, for letting Mason explore your place, for everything. Thank you for trusting me with him, with both of you. Victoria touched Lucas's cheek gently. Drive safe. Always do. But before Lucas could turn away, Victoria caught his hand. That kiss you promised me. The one that means something. I'm still waiting for it. Lucas's heart rate picked up. I know. What are you waiting for? The right moment. When it's just us, and there's no pretending, and we both know exactly what it means. Lucas squeezed her hand. Soon, Victoria. I promise. I'm going to hold you to that, Mr. Bennett. The drive home was quiet, Mason sleeping peacefully in the back seat. Lucas thought about everything that had changed in less than a month. The fear and grief that had defined his life for so long felt like it was finally loosening its grip, making room for something new, something that looked a lot like hope. The following Saturday, Lucas's mother offered to take Mason for the whole weekend, an offer she'd been making for months that Lucas had always refused. But this time, with Victoria on his mind and the promise of actual time together without work or parental responsibilities, Lucas said yes. He called Victoria Friday night after dropping Mason off. "I have the whole weekend," he said. "No work, no kid, no obligations. Want to do something?" "Like what?" Victoria sounded intrigued. "I don't know, something normal, something people do on dates." "Lucas Bennett, are you asking me on an actual date?" "I think I am." "Well then, yes, absolutely yes." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Pick me up tomorrow at 10. Dress casual. And Lucas?" "Yeah?" "I'm really glad you called." "Me too." Lucas hung up and immediately panicked about what constituted a proper date when you were 34, had a kid, and hadn't been on one in half a decade. Finally, he texted Ray's wife, Maria, who he'd always thought had excellent judgment. "What do people do on dates these days?" The response came back immediately. "Finally asking Victoria out officially?" Lucas stared at his phone. "How did you know about Victoria?" "Please." "Ray told me weeks ago. About time you made it official. Take her somewhere fun, not fancy. Show her who you really are. That's not very specific. You'll figure it out. Trust yourself." Lucas spent the rest of the evening planning, eventually settling on an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane, but it felt right, and that had to count for something. The next morning, he picked Victoria up at precisely 10 o'clock. She came down wearing jeans, boots, and a leather jacket that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "So where are we going?" she asked as she climbed into the truck. "It's a surprise." "I'm not great with surprises." "I know, but trust me on this one." Lucas drove north out of the city into the rolling hills and farmland of the Hudson Valley. Victoria kept asking questions, which Lucas deflected with vague answers. After about an hour, he pulled off the main road onto a gravel drive that led to a sprawling farm with a hand-painted sign. "Riverside Orchard, you pick apples." Victoria looked at the sign, then at Lucas, then burst out laughing. "Apple picking? You brought me apple picking? Is that okay? I know it's kind of corny, but I used to come here with Emma and Mason when they were little, and it's one of my favorite places, and I thought—" Lucas trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "If you hate it, we can leave. We can do something else." "Lucas." Victoria put her hand on his arm. "I love it. This is perfect." They spent the next 3 hours wandering through the orchard, filling bags with apples, and talking about everything. Victoria told Lucas about growing up as an only child, about the pressure of inheriting her father's company, about the loneliness of always being the boss. Lucas talked about his own childhood in a working-class family, about meeting Olivia in college, about the joy and terror of becoming a father at 25. They talked about Emma, and for the first time, Lucas found he could share the good memories without being overwhelmed by the grief. Victoria listened without pity, asking gentle questions and laughing at the funny stories, like the time Emma convinced Mason that trees could talk if you listened hard enough. "She sounds like she was amazing," Victoria said as they sat on a hay bale at the edge of the orchard, eating apples and watching other families pick fruit. "She was. Stubborn as hell, creative, fearless." Lucas smiled at the memory. "She would have liked you. She always gravitated toward strong women. Her favorite character was Mulan because she saved everyone and didn't need a prince to help." "Smart kid." "The smartest." Lucas finished his apple and tossed the core into a compost bin. "You know what the hardest part was? After she died?" "What?" "Everyone wanted me to talk about how brave she was, how she fought so hard, how she never gave up. And all that was true. But she was also 7 years old. She liked cartoons and mac and cheese and playing in mud puddles. She was just a kid who got dealt a terrible hand, you know? She shouldn't have had to be brave. She should have just gotten to be a kid." Victoria took his hand. "I'm sorry you lost her. Both of you lost her." "Yeah," Lucas squeezed her hand. "But I'm learning that loving people means accepting that you might lose them. And the love is still worth it, even knowing how it might end." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. Finally, Victoria said, "I've been thinking about something you said, about not being able to promise me next month." Lucas tensed slightly. "Victoria, let me finish. I don't need promises about the future, Lucas. I've spent my whole life making 5-year plans and strategic projections. And you know what I've learned? Life doesn't care about your plans. It's going to do whatever it wants regardless. She turned to face him fully. So instead of worrying about next month or next year, I just want to be here now, with you. Is that enough? It's more than enough, Lucas said quietly. It's everything. And there, sitting on a hay bale in an apple orchard with the autumn sun warm on their faces, Lucas leaned in and finally kissed Victoria Hale. It wasn't like the movies, with swelling music and perfect lighting. It was real and slightly awkward because they had to figure out the angle, and Victoria's jacket zipper got caught on Lucas's shirt. But it was honest and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. Was that the kiss that means something? Yeah, Lucas said. That was the one. Good. Because I've been waiting weeks for you to do that. Worth the wait? Absolutely. They stayed at the orchard until closing time, leaving with bags full of apples and plans to make pies together. On the drive back to the city, Victoria's hand found Lucas's on the center console, and they drove like that, connected and content. Thank you for today, Victoria said as they crossed back into the city limits, for sharing that place with me, for trusting me with your memories. Thank you for coming, for being patient with me while I figured this out. We're figuring it out together, Victoria corrected. That's kind of the point. Lucas dropped Victoria at her apartment with promises to see each other tomorrow for pie making. But before she got out of the truck, she leaned over and kissed him again. Longer this time, deeper, a promise of more to come. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Victoria. Lucas drove to his mother's house to pick up Mason, his heart lighter than it had been in years. His mother took one look at his face and smiled. Good day? She asked. Really good day. Mason came running out, full of stories about his weekend adventures. On the drive home, he chattered nonstop about the science museum his grandmother had taken him to, barely pausing for breath. Dad? Mason said as Lucas was tucking him into bed that night. Are you and Victoria boyfriend and girlfriend now? Lucas considered how to answer that. Something like that. Is that okay with you? Yeah. Mason yawned. She's nice, and she promised to help me print that dinosaur. When's she coming over again? Tomorrow. We're going to make apple pie. Can I help? Of course. Cool. Mason's eyes were already closing. Night, Dad. Night, buddy. Love you. Love you too. Lucas stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his son sleep, thinking about how far they'd both come. The road ahead was still uncertain, still full of potential pitfalls and complications. But for the first time in a long time, Lucas wasn't afraid of what came next. He was ready for it. The Sunday morning sun poured through Lucas's kitchen windows, turning the modest space golden. Victoria stood at the counter wearing one of Lucas's old t-shirts and an apron, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, completely focused on peeling apples with the kind of intensity she usually reserved for contract negotiations. Mason sat on a stool beside her, his own pile of apples waiting, a child-sized peeler in his hand. Like this? Mason asked, struggling to get the peeler to cooperate. Almost. Try using a little less pressure. Let the blade do the work. Victoria demonstrated, a long spiral of apple skin curling away from the fruit. See? Oh, that's way easier. Mason tried again, this time successfully removing a strip of peel. Dad, look, I'm doing it. Lucas looked up from where he was measuring flour for the pie crust, his heart doing that thing it had been doing a lot lately, swelling with an emotion he'd forgotten he could feel. Victoria fit into his kitchen like she'd always been there, patient with Mason's questions, comfortable in the domestic chaos of a Sunday morning baking project. You're a natural, buddy, Lucas said. Keep it up, and you'll have your pile done before Victoria and I finish ours. Is that a challenge? Victoria raised an eyebrow. Because I'm very competitive, Mr. Bennett. I've noticed, Miss Hale. They worked in comfortable synchronization, the kitchen filling with the sweet smell of apples and cinnamon. Mason chattered constantly, jumping between topics with the randomness of a 7-year-old mind. Dinosaurs, his upcoming school year, the kid in his class who could burp the alphabet, whether apples felt pain when you cut them. They don't have a nervous system, Victoria explained seriously, so scientists don't think they can feel pain the way we do. But they do send out chemical signals when they're damaged, Some people think that's a kind of communication. Whoa! So they're like talking to each other when we pick them? In a way, nature's pretty amazing when you really look at it. Lucas watched Mason's face light up with this new information, watched him immediately start theorizing about what else might be communicating that humans couldn't hear. This was what he'd wanted for his son, people who engaged with his curiosity, who treated his questions with respect, who helped him see the world as something wonderful and complex. And Victoria did it without even thinking about it. "Okay," Lucas said once all the apples were peeled and sliced. "Now comes the fun part. Mason, you ready to get your hands dirty?" "Yes!" Mason hopped off his stool and ran to wash his hands in the sink. For the next hour, they assembled 2 pies, one traditional apple with a lattice top, one experimental creation that Mason insisted should have chocolate chips mixed in because chocolate makes everything better. Victoria proved surprisingly adept at crimping pie crusts, her precise fingers creating perfect little ridges along the edges. "Where did you learn to do that?" Lucas asked, watching her work. "YouTube, about 20 minutes before you picked me up yesterday." Victoria grinned. "I may have spent my entire Friday night watching pie-making tutorials because I didn't want to look incompetent in front of a 7-year-old. "You looked up pie videos for me?" Mason asked, clearly delighted by this information. "Of course. I take my baking very seriously." While the pies baked, filling the apartment with the scent of cinnamon and caramelizing sugar, they cleaned up the kitchen together. Mason was assigned spoon-licking duty, which he took very seriously, while Lucas and Victoria tackled the flour-covered counters and sticky utensils. "This is nice," Victoria said quietly, her voice nearly lost under the sound of running water. "I didn't expect to enjoy domestic life quite this much." "You sound surprised." "I am, a little. I've spent so many years focused on work, on building the company, on proving myself. I never really thought about what I might be missing." Victoria rinsed a measuring cup, her expression thoughtful. "But this, cooking with you and Mason, making a mess, laughing over experimental chocolate apple pie, this feels important in a way board meetings never do." Lucas bumped her shoulder gently with his. "Welcome to the glamorous world of single parenthood. It's all flour on the floor and sticky counters from here on out." "I think I can handle it." Mason, finished with his spoon-licking duties, wandered over to the living room and turned on the TV. Within minutes, he was absorbed in a nature documentary about prehistoric sea creatures, leaving Lucas and Victoria alone in the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas dried his hands on a dish towel, then leaned against the counter facing Victoria. "And you have to promise to be honest." "Okay." Victoria set down the bowl she'd been washing, giving him her full attention. "Are you sure about this? About getting involved with someone who has a kid, who has all this baggage, who can't just drop everything for spontaneous weekend trips or late dinners because there's always school and bedtimes and—" Victoria pressed her finger to Lucas's lips, silencing him. "I'm going to stop you right there. Yes, I'm sure. Yes, your life is complicated. Yes, there are logistics and responsibilities that come with dating someone who has a child. But Lucas, Mason isn't baggage. He's part of who you are, part of what makes you the man I care about. But you didn't sign up for—" "I signed up for exactly this." Victoria's voice was firm. "When I agreed to go to that reunion with you, when I decided to let this become real, I knew what I was walking into. I'm not some naive 20-year-old who thinks love is just candlelit dinners and romantic weekends. I'm 42 years old. I know what I want, and what I want is you. All of you, including the 7-year-old dinosaur expert in the other room." Lucas felt something tight in his chest loosen. "I just don't want you to wake up 6 months from now and realize you made a mistake. The only mistake would be walking away because we're afraid." Victoria cupped his face in her hands. "I spent 15 years being afraid, Lucas. Afraid I wasn't good enough, wasn't tough enough, wasn't man enough for this industry. And you know what all that fear got me? A successful company and a very empty apartment. I don't want to be afraid anymore." Lucas pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Me neither." They stood like that for a long moment, the TV's narrator droning on about mosasaurs in the background, the timer on the oven counting down the minutes until the pies were done. It was such an ordinary moment, standing in a messy kitchen on a Sunday morning, but it felt profound in its simplicity. The oven timer beeped, breaking the spell. They pulled the pies out, both perfectly golden, the experimental chocolate version actually looking pretty good, and set them on the counter to cool. Mason appeared immediately, drawn by the smell. Can we eat them now? They need to cool for at least an hour, buddy, Lucas said. Otherwise the filling will be lava hot. But they smell so good. I know, but patience is a virtue, or so I've been told. That's a lie adults tell kids, Mason grumbled, but he was smiling. They spent the rest of the morning playing board games, Mason beating both adults at Candyland through a combination of luck and suspiciously timed accidental card shuffles. Victoria proved to be a gracious loser, only mildly protesting when Mason's character landed on the Candy Castle space while hers got stuck in the molasses swamp for the third time. This game is rigged, Victoria declared. You're just bad at it, Mason said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Mason, Lucas warned, but Victoria was laughing. He's not wrong. I'm objectively terrible at Candyland. Around noon, Lucas's phone rang. His mother's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Mom, Lucas answered. Lucas, honey, I'm sorry to bother you on your Sunday. His mother's voice carried a note of concern. But I just got a call from Olivia. She wants to talk to you. She said it's important. Lucas's stomach dropped. Olivia? What does she want? She didn't say. Just asked if I could pass along her number. She's apparently changed it since... His mother trailed off delicately. Since we broke up. Yeah. Lucas rubbed his forehead. Did she say when she wanted to talk? Soon, she said. Today, if possible. Lucas glanced at Victoria, who was helping Mason set up another board game, oblivious to the conversation. Okay, thanks, Mom. Can you text me the number? After he hung up, Lucas stood in the kitchen for a moment, staring at his phone. 2 months ago, the thought of Olivia reaching out would have sent him into a spiral of anxiety and old wounds. But now, after the reunion, after finding something real with Victoria, the call felt less like a threat and more like an unwelcome complication. Everything okay? Victoria appeared at his elbow, her voice low so Mason wouldn't hear. My mom just called. Olivia wants to talk to me. Says it's important. Victoria's expression flickered, surprise maybe, or concern, but she recovered quickly. Do you want to call her back? I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore it, pretend I never got the message. But she said it's important. What if something's wrong? What if she needs help with something? Victoria studied his face carefully. Would it bother you if I was here when you called her? Lucas considered this. The old Lucas, the one still trapped by his past, might have wanted privacy for that conversation. Might have felt the need to protect Victoria from the complicated emotions that came with his ex-girlfriend. But the new Lucas, the one learning to let people in, knew the answer. No, I'd actually prefer it if you stayed, if you're okay with that. I'm okay with it. Victoria squeezed his hand. Want me to keep Mason distracted? Please. Lucas went into his bedroom and closed the door. He sat on the edge of his bed, Olivia's new number glowing on his phone screen. Finally, he hit the call button. She answered on the second ring. Lucas? Hey, Liv. My mom said you wanted to talk. Yeah, thanks for calling back. Olivia's voice sounded different over the phone, smaller somehow, more uncertain. I know this is weird, reaching out like this after everything, but I needed to talk to you about something. Okay. Lucas waited, his heart beating faster despite himself. I saw you at the reunion. With Victoria. Olivia paused. You looked happy, really happy, and it made me realize something I should have told you a long time ago. Olivia, please just let me say this. She took a shaky breath. When Emma died, I blamed you. Not out loud, not in any way that was fair or rational, but in my head, in my heart, I blamed you for moving forward when I couldn't, for being functional when I was falling apart, for still being able to smile and play with Mason when I could barely get out of bed. Lucas closed his eyes, the old familiar pain washing over him. I know, but it wasn't your fault, Lucas. None of it was your fault. You were just trying to survive, trying to be there for our son, trying to keep your head above water. And I made you feel guilty for it. I made you feel like grieving wrong somehow, like you didn't love Emma enough because you could still function. Well, Liv, we don't have to, Yes, we do. Olivia's voice was firmer now. Because I need you to know that I was wrong. The way our relationship ended, the things I said to you, the way I just walked away. All of it was wrong. You deserved better. Emma deserved better. Mason deserved better. Lucas felt his throat tighten. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been in therapy for the past year, really working through my grief instead of just running from it. And I've realized that I can't move forward with David, can't build something real with him, until I make peace with what I did to you. Olivia's voice cracked. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was drowning in grief, and I couldn't see that you were drowning too. And I need you to know that I'm sorry, so incredibly sorry. Lucas sat in silence, processing this. Part of him had waited years to hear these words, had needed this acknowledgement that the end of their relationship hadn't been entirely his fault. But another part of him, the part that had slowly healed, that had learned to forgive himself, didn't need it anymore. I appreciate you saying that, Lucas said finally. Really, I do. And I forgive you, Liv. I forgave you a long time ago. Did you? Olivia sounded surprised. Because I'm not sure I've forgiven myself. Then that's something you need to work on. But you don't need my permission or my absolution to move on. You're allowed to be happy, Olivia. Emma would want that for both of us. Olivia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. Tell me about Victoria. She seemed really special. Lucas smiled despite the heaviness of the conversation. She is. She's smart and funny and patient with Mason. She doesn't try to replace you or Emma. She's just herself. And that's enough. I'm glad you found her. You deserve to be happy, Lucas. You always did. So do you. David seems like a good guy. He is. He's been really understanding about all of this, about me needing to make peace with my past before I can fully commit to our future. Olivia sighed. I should let you go. I'm sure you have plans with your family. Yeah, we're making apple pie. Of course you are. You always did love fall. There was a smile in Olivia's voice now, sad but genuine. Take care of yourself, Lucas, and give Mason a hug from me. I will. You take care too, Liv. After they hung up, Lucas sat on his bed for several minutes, letting the conversation settle over him. It was strange having that final piece of closure, that acknowledgement of shared pain and mutual mistakes. But it didn't change anything, not really. His life had moved on. He'd built something new, something that didn't require validation from his past. When Lucas emerged from the bedroom, he found Victoria and Mason in the living room, the experimental chocolate apple pie cut into wedges on plates, Mason's face covered in chocolate. We couldn't wait, Victoria said apologetically. Mason made a very compelling argument about needing to quality test the chocolate version before it got too cold. Did he now? It was for science, Mason said seriously, his mouth full of pie. And Dad, it's really good. The chocolate totally works. Lucas sat down beside them and accepted the plate Victoria handed him. The pie was, surprisingly, excellent, the chocolate adding a richness that complemented the apples perfectly. Verdict? Victoria asked, watching him taste it. Mason was right. This is actually amazing. See? Mason pumped his fist. I told you chocolate makes everything better. They finished the pie together, and then Mason asked if they could go to the park. It was a beautiful afternoon, warm but not too hot, perfect weather for the playground. They walked the 3 blocks to Riverside Park, Mason running ahead while Lucas and Victoria followed at a more leisurely pace, their hands intertwined. You okay? Victoria asked quietly. After the phone call? Yeah, actually I am. Lucas watched Mason climb onto the monkey bars. Olivia called to apologize for how things ended, for blaming me, for walking away. She's been in therapy, working through everything. That must have been hard to hear. It was, but it was also freeing somehow. Like the last chapter of that story finally got written, and now I can close the book completely. Lucas squeezed Victoria's hand. I don't need her apology to move on. I've already moved on, but it was good to hear anyway. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder as they walked. You're a good man, Lucas Bennett, you know that. I'm just trying to do my best. Your best is pretty damn remarkable. At the park, they spent the next hour pushing Mason on the swings, helping him navigate the climbing structure. and generally enjoying the simple pleasure of an autumn afternoon. Other families filled the playground, couples with young children, teenagers playing basketball on the nearby court, an elderly man feeding pigeons on a bench. Normal life happening all around them. At one point, while Mason was occupied with the slide, Victoria pulled Lucas aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her expression serious enough that Lucas's stomach clenched with worry. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I got a call Friday from a colleague in Chicago. They're looking for someone to head up a major commercial development project, a mixed-use complex that would be the biggest thing I've ever managed. It's a huge opportunity." Lucas's heart sank. "In Chicago." "In Chicago," Victoria confirmed. "It would mean relocating for at least 2 years, maybe longer. The money is incredible, and career-wise, it's exactly the kind of high-profile project that could take Hale Construction to the next level." "Wow, that's amazing, Victoria." Lucas forced enthusiasm into his voice, even as his mind raced. "You should absolutely do it." "Lucas," Victoria caught his face in her hands, making him look at her. "I haven't said yes. I haven't even seriously considered it. Because Chicago is 1,000 miles away from you and Mason, and that matters more than any project, no matter how prestigious. You can't turn down an opportunity like that because of me. We've only been together for a few weeks. I can't be the reason you—" "Stop." Victoria's voice was firm. "You don't get to make this decision for me. Yes, we've only been officially together for a few weeks. But Lucas, I've been falling for you for months. Long before that reunion, long before we made this real, and I'm not interested in a career opportunity that takes me away from something that actually matters." "But what about your company? Your future?" "My company will survive without this project. There will be other opportunities, other contracts. But you and Mason, this doesn't come along every day." Victoria's eyes were intense, earnest. "I spent 15 years putting my career first, sacrificing everything personal for professional success. And I was good at it. I built something I'm proud of. But I was also lonely and exhausted and starting to wonder what the point of it all was." Lucas pulled her close, his heart too full for words. "I don't want you to resent me someday, to look back and wonder what you gave up. The only thing I'd resent is walking away from something real because I was too scared to choose it." Victoria pulled back enough to look at him. "Unless you don't want this? Unless I'm moving too fast or assuming too much? No, I want this. I want you." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I'm just not used to being someone's priority." "We'll get used to it." They stood there holding each other while Mason played, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the playground. Lucas thought about the Chicago offer, about what Victoria was choosing to turn down, and felt a complicated mix of gratitude and guilt. But underneath those emotions was something simpler, relief. Because he didn't want to lose this, didn't want to lose her, not when they were just beginning. "Dad, Victoria!" Mason's voice carried across the playground. "Come push me really high." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the park, taking turns pushing Mason on the swings until he was shrieking with delight. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they walked home together, Mason between them, holding both their hands. "This was a good day," Mason announced. "We made pie. I beat you at Candyland, and the park was fun. Can Victoria come over again tomorrow?" "I have to work tomorrow, buddy," Victoria said. "But maybe later this week?" "Okay, but you should come over a lot, because Dad's happier when you're here." Lucas felt his face flush, but Victoria just smiled. "Is he?" "Yeah, he smiles more, and he doesn't get that sad look in his eyes like he used to." Lucas's throat tightened. He thought he'd been doing a good job of hiding his grief from Mason, of being strong and functional. But kids saw everything, noticed everything. "Well," Victoria said, squeezing Mason's hand, "your dad makes me happier too, so I guess that works out pretty well." That night, after Mason was in bed and Victoria had gone home, Lucas sat in his living room with a cup of tea, thinking about everything that had happened in just one day. Olivia's call, Victoria's job offer, Mason's innocent observation about his father's happiness, it all swirled together into a reminder of how quickly life could change. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Made it home. Thank you for today. For the pie, the park, for being you." Lucas typed back, Thank you for choosing us. For Chicago. Not a hard choice. You're worth more than any project. Still, I know what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. Lucas smiled at his phone, then set it aside and went to check on Mason one more time. His son was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the edge, completely unconscious in the way only children could be. Lucas pulled the blanket up and sat on the edge of the bed, just watching him sleep. I think we're going to be okay, buddy, Lucas whispered. Better than okay. I think we might actually be happy. The following week settled into a new rhythm. Work continued at the construction site. The Morrison project was finally back on schedule after the blueprint issues were resolved, and Lucas's crew was making good progress. At the office, Lucas and Victoria maintained their professional distance, though occasionally they'd catch each other's eye across a meeting room and have to suppress smiles. Outside of work, their relationship deepened. Victoria became a regular fixture at Lucas's apartment, joining them for dinners and homework sessions. She helped Mason with a science project about ocean ecosystems, bringing a level of enthusiasm and attention to detail that resulted in a diorama that was probably too advanced for second grade, but that Mason was immensely proud of. Do you think Mr. Rodriguez will notice that we used actual scientific measurements for the depth zones? Mason asked, studying their creation. Probably, Victoria said. But that's a good thing. It shows you went above and beyond. What if the other kids think I'm showing off? Then they're learning that doing your best isn't showing off. It's just doing your best. Victoria ruffled his hair. Be proud of your work, Mason. You earned it. Lucas watched these exchanges from the kitchen, his heart full. Victoria had slipped into their lives so seamlessly, filling a space he hadn't even realized was empty. She wasn't trying to be Mason's mother. She was just being present, engaged, interested in his world. And Mason was blossoming under the attention. One evening in mid-October, about 6 weeks after the reunion, Lucas invited Victoria over for what he described as an important conversation. He'd spent the previous night lying awake, thinking about the future, about what he wanted, about the courage it took to move forward. Victoria arrived at 7, looking concerned. Your text sounded serious. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Better than fine. Lucas took her coat. I just wanted to talk to you about something important, and I wanted to do it properly. Mason was already in his room doing homework, giving them privacy in the living room. Lucas sat beside Victoria on the couch, suddenly nervous despite having rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in his head. So, Lucas began, then stopped. This is harder than I thought it would be. Lucas, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. That's kind of the point. Lucas took her hand. Victoria, these past few weeks with you have been incredible. Watching you with Mason, seeing how naturally you fit into our life, realizing that I don't have to choose between being a father and having a relationship because you embrace both parts of who I am. It's shown me something important. What's that? That I'm ready, really ready, not just for dating or casual relationship, but for something real, something lasting. Lucas took a breath. I know we agreed to take things slow, to not put pressure on this, but I need you to know that this isn't casual for me anymore. You're not just someone I'm seeing, you're someone I'm falling in love with. Victoria's eyes widened. Lucas, you don't have to say it back. I'm not expecting that. I just needed you to know where I stand, what this means to me. Lucas squeezed her hand. I want you in my life, Victoria. In our lives. Not just for now, but for the long haul. And I know that's a lot to put on you, especially when we've only been together for a few weeks, but Victoria kissed him, cutting off his nervous rambling. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too, you idiot, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. I've been terrified to say it because I thought it was too soon, thought I'd scare you off. But Lucas, I've been falling for you since the day you walked into my office and asked me to pretend to be your girlfriend. Maybe even before that. Lucas felt like his heart might burst. Yeah? Yeah. Victoria cupped his face in her hands. I love you. I love Mason. I love coming home to you, making terrible pies, helping with homework, all of it. This is what I want, Lucas. You are what I want. They kissed again, longer this time, pouring months of repressed feelings into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against Victoria's. So what now? He asked. Now? Now we keep doing exactly what we've been doing. We take it day by day, we figure things out as we go, we build something real together. Victoria smiled. No more pretending, no more holding back, just us, being honest about what we want. I want you to move in with us. The words surprised even Lucas. He hadn't planned to say them, hadn't rehearsed that particular request. But once they were out there, hanging in the air between them, he realized he meant them completely. Victoria pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his face. Are you serious? I think I am. Lucas's heart was pounding. I know it's fast. I know there are 1,000 practical considerations, and we should probably wait longer and think it through more carefully. But Victoria, you're here almost every night anyway. Mason asks for you when you're not around, and I don't want to waste time being cautious when I already know what I want. What about Mason? Have you talked to him about this? Not yet. I wanted to ask you first, make sure you were even interested before I brought it up with him. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Lucas felt his stomach drop, wondering if he'd pushed too far, too fast, if he'd ruined everything by asking for too much. Then Victoria smiled, brilliant and genuine. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll move in with you, with both of you. Victoria laughed at Lucas's shocked expression. Did you really think I'd say no? Lucas, I've been looking for excuses to spend more time here. My apartment feels empty now when I go home. I miss you both the moment I leave. Lucas pulled her close, relief and joy flooding through him. We should probably have a conversation with Mason. Make sure he's comfortable with this. Agreed. This is his home too. He gets a vote. They called Mason out from his room, and he came running, immediately sensing that something important was happening. Lucas sat him down between them on the couch. Buddy, Victoria and I want to talk to you about something big. Mason's eyes went wide. Are you getting married? Not yet, Lucas said, then caught Victoria's eye and amended. Not right now. But we do want to ask you about something else. How would you feel if Victoria moved in with us, if she became part of our family officially? Mason looked between them, processing this. Would she have her own room? She'd share my room, Lucas explained. But she'd be here all the time, not just visiting. Is that okay with you? Would we still do dinosaur projects? Victoria smiled. Absolutely. In fact, I'd probably help with even more projects if I lived here. And would you make breakfast sometimes? Because Dad's pancakes are kind of boring. Hey, Lucas protested, but Victoria was laughing. I can make breakfast. My pancakes are better than your dad's, but don't tell him I said that. Mason thought about this for another moment, his young face serious. Then he asked the question that mattered most. Do you love my dad? Yes, Victoria said without hesitation. Very much. And you're not going to leave like other people did? Lucas's heart broke a little at the question, at the fear underneath it. Mason had lost his sister, then lost the closest thing to a mother he'd known when Olivia left. Of course he was worried about Victoria disappearing too. Victoria slid off the couch and knelt in front of Mason, putting herself at his eye level. Mason, I can't promise that nothing will ever go wrong or that life won't be complicated sometimes, but I can promise that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here because I want to be here, because I love your dad and I care about you, and I'm the kind of person who keeps my promises. Mason studied her face carefully, then turned to Lucas. Dad, do you want her to stay? More than anything, buddy. Okay then, Mason nodded decisively. She can move in, but she has to bring her 3D printer. We still need to make that dinosaur collection we talked about. Victoria laughed and pulled Mason into a hug. Deal. The 3D printer comes with me. That night, after Mason was asleep, Lucas and Victoria sat on the couch making plans. They talked about logistics, when Victoria would officially move in, what furniture to keep, how to combine two households into one. They talked about telling people at work, about maintaining professionalism while being honest about their relationship. They talked about the future, carefully and cautiously, neither wanting to jinx the fragile, beautiful thing they were building. I'm scared, Victoria admitted as the night grew late. Not of this, not of us, but of how much I have to lose now. Before you, my life was predictable, safe. Now it's messy and complicated and terrifying. And? Lucas prompted. And I've never been happier. Victoria leaned against him. Isn't that strange? That the scary thing is also the best thing? Not strange at all. That's how you know it matters. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the apartment quiet except for the distant sounds of the city outside. Lucas thought about everything that had led to this moment. Emma's death, his relationship with Olivia ending, 2 years of just surviving, the reunion he'd been dreading, the fake relationship that became real. All of it had been necessary, had brought him exactly here. Lucas? Victoria's voice was sleepy. Thank you for taking a chance on me. On us. Thank you for saying yes to a ridiculous request from your nervous site manager. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Victoria corrected. The best decision was asking me to move in. Lucas smiled into her hair. Yeah, you might be right about that. Victoria moved in on a crisp Saturday morning in late October, when the trees along Lucas's street had turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The moving truck arrived at 8, smaller than Lucas had expected. Victoria had decided to put most of her furniture in storage, keeping only what truly mattered. Her 3D printer, true to her promise to Mason, her extensive book collection, the vintage armchair that had belonged to her grandmother, personal items that told the story of who she was. Mason stood on the sidewalk in his dinosaur pajamas, practically vibrating with excitement as movers carried boxes up the stairs to their second-floor apartment. He'd spent the previous evening helping Lucas rearrange furniture, making space in closets and drawers, clearing out half of Lucas's dresser for Victoria's clothes. The boy had approached it with the seriousness of a military operation, even drawing a diagram of how Victoria's 3D printer should be positioned in the corner of the living room for optimal workflow. Is that the printer? Mason asked, as 2 movers carefully maneuvered a large box through the doorway. That's it, buddy, Victoria confirmed, signing paperwork on a clipboard. We'll set it up this afternoon, okay? After we get everything else organized. Can we make the Stegosaurus first, or maybe a Brachiosaurus? Those are really cool because of their long necks. We'll make whatever you want. Victoria ruffled his hair. But first, breakfast. Your dad's making pancakes. The boring kind? Hey, I'm standing right here, Lucas called from inside the apartment, and Victoria winked at Mason. Don't worry. I brought my secret ingredient. We'll make them less boring. The day unfolded in controlled chaos. Boxes stacked in every room, belongings finding new homes, 3 people learning to navigate shared space. Lucas's mother showed up around noon with sandwiches and unsolicited advice about where Victoria should put her books, though her eyes were suspiciously bright as she watched her son and his new partner work together. You look happy, honey, she said to Lucas, while Victoria and Mason were busy setting up the printer. Really, genuinely happy. I am, Mom. Lucas wiped dust off a bookshelf. Terrified but happy. That's how you know it's real. His mother squeezed his arm. Your father and I were terrified when we got married. 23 years old, no money, no plan. But we figured it out together. I just don't want to mess this up. For Mason's sake, you know? He's already attached to her. Lucas, his mother made him look at her. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Not everything good in your life has to end badly. Sometimes good things just get to stay good. Lucas nodded, but the fear remained, a small voice in the back of his mind whispering that this was too perfect, too easy, that something would inevitably go wrong. He'd learned through painful experience that happiness was temporary, that love could be ripped away without warning. But when Victoria emerged from the living room, laughing as Mason explained the differences between hadrosaurs and ceratopsians with intense 7-year-old passion, Lucas pushed the fear aside. His mother was right. He couldn't live his whole life braced for disaster. By evening, most of the boxes were unpacked and the apartment had transformed into something that felt like theirs rather than just his. Victoria's vintage armchair sat near the window where the afternoon light was best for reading. Her books filled the previously empty shelves, small touches throughout, her coffee mug in the kitchen, her jacket hanging by the door, her toothbrush in the bathroom, announced that this space belonged to all of them now. Mason fell asleep on the couch halfway through dinner, exhausted from helping all day. Lucas carried him to bed while Victoria cleaned up the kitchen, and when Lucas returned, he found her standing in the living room looking around with an expression he couldn't quite read. Second thoughts? Lucas asked, only half joking. No, the opposite, actually. Victoria turned to face him. I'm standing here realizing this is the first place that's ever really felt like home. Not just a place I sleep, but home. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Lucas crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Welcome home, Victoria Hale. She kissed him softly, and for a moment everything was perfect and simple and exactly as it should be. Then Monday arrived, bringing with it the complications they'd known were inevitable. The whispers started almost immediately when Lucas and Victoria arrived at the construction office together. Margaret, Victoria's assistant, raised one knowing eyebrow, but said nothing. Ray took one look at them walking in side by side and grinned like he'd won the lottery. Knew it, Ray said when Lucas got to the site trailer. I called it weeks ago. Told Maria there was something going on between you two. We're keeping it professional at work, Lucas said, hanging up his jacket. Nothing's changed as far as the job goes. Sure, boss. Whatever you say. Ray's grin didn't fade. For what it's worth, I think it's great. You've been different lately, lighter. The guys have noticed. The guys have been gossiping about my personal life? Construction workers gossip worse than high school girls. You know this. Ray handed Lucas the day's schedule. But seriously, we're happy for you. Victoria's good people. You both deserve some happiness. The day proceeded normally enough. Lucas managed his crew, reviewed plans, solved the inevitable problems that arose on any construction site. But he was hyper-aware of the glances, the quickly hushed conversations, the way people looked at him differently now. At lunch, Victoria texted, "How bad is it on your end?" Lucas replied, "Manageable. Everyone's being polite about being nosy. You?" Margaret cornered me about HR policies and conflict of interest disclosures. Apparently we need to file paperwork. Romantic. Extremely. Want to fill out forms together tonight? I'll bring wine. Lucas smiled at his phone, then noticed Ray watching him with amusement. What? Lucas asked defensively. Nothing. You're just smiling at your phone like a teenager. It's cute. I'm your boss. I could fire you. No, you couldn't. I'm too good at my job. Ray took a bite of his sandwich. Plus, Victoria likes me. I'm safe. By mid-afternoon, Lucas was called to Victoria's office to discuss a budget issue on the Henderson project. When he arrived, Margaret waved him through with a knowing smile that made Lucas wonder exactly how much the woman knew or suspected. Inside, Victoria sat behind her desk in full CEO mode. Hair in that severe bun, reading glasses on, 3 computer monitors displaying spreadsheets. She looked up as Lucas entered, and for a fraction of a second her professional mask slipped. Her eyes softened, her mouth quirked in a small private smile meant just for him. Then the mask returned. Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming. We need to discuss the Henderson overruns. They spent 20 minutes reviewing numbers, discussing options, making decisions. It was perfectly professional, exactly like dozens of meetings they'd had before. Except Lucas kept noticing small things. The way Victoria twisted her pen when she was thinking, the small scar on her eyebrow catching the light, the fact that she'd worn the blouse he'd complimented last week. Are you listening to me? Victoria asked, pulling him back to the present. Sorry. Yes. Henderson project. Budget overruns. I'm on it. Victoria studied him for a moment, then glanced at her office door to confirm it was closed. Lucas, we need to establish better boundaries. I can't have you spacing out in meetings because you're distracted by the fact that we share a bathroom now. I wasn't... Lucas stopped because she was right. Okay, fine. This is harder than I thought it would be. Sitting here discussing budgets when all I can think about is how you stole the blankets last night. I did not steal the blankets. You're a blanket hog. I am not... Lucas caught himself, realizing they were arguing about blankets in her office. See? This is the problem. How are we supposed to separate work and home when everything overlaps? Victoria leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses. We figure it out. Together. Like we figure everything else out. Her voice softened. But Lucas, when we're here, at work, I need you to be my site manager. Not my boyfriend. Not the man I wake up next to, just my employee. Can you do that? Lucas understood what she was asking. Victoria had worked too hard, fought too many battles to be taken seriously, to let their relationship undermine her authority. If people thought she was giving him preferential treatment, or that their personal relationship affected professional decisions, it would damage everything she'd built. I can do that, Lucas said. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful. Don't apologize, just help me protect what we're building, both at work and at home. Victoria put her glasses back on. Now, About Henderson, I think we need to bring in additional crew, even if it cuts into our profit margin. We can't afford delays. They finished the meeting in pure business mode, and when Lucas left her office, he felt he'd passed some kind of test. This was going to work, but only if they both committed to maintaining those boundaries. The real test came 3 weeks later. Lucas had been managing the Morrison project for months, and it was finally approaching completion. The final inspection was scheduled for the first week of November, and Lucas's crew had been working overtime to ensure everything was perfect. This was the kind of high-profile project that could make or break Hale Construction's reputation. The morning of the inspection, Lucas arrived at the site at 5:30 to do one final walkthrough. Everything looked good. The electrical work clean and to code, the finishes polished, the landscaping completed. Ray had done a final check the night before and confirmed they were ready, but when the city inspector arrived at 9, he found a problem. "The emergency exit on the second floor," the inspector said, making notes on his clipboard. "The door opens inward. Code requires it to open outward." Lucas felt his stomach drop. That can't be right. The plans clearly showed... I don't care what the plans showed. The code is clear. Emergency exits must open outward to prevent crowd crush in an evacuation scenario. Lucas pulled out the approved blueprints, reviewed them, and felt his blood run cold. The inspector was right. The architectural plans had specified an outward opening door, but somewhere in the construction process, it had been installed incorrectly. And Lucas, as site manager, had signed off on it. "We can fix this," Lucas said, his mind already racing through solutions. "Give us a week. We'll replace the door and, well, doesn't work that way," the inspector interrupted. "The final occupancy permit is contingent on passing this inspection. You fail today, you don't get the permit. The building can't open on schedule." He continued making notes. "I'm marking this as a failed inspection. You can request a re-inspection once the issue is corrected, but there's a 3-week wait time for scheduling." 3 weeks. The building was supposed to open in 10 days. The client had already scheduled a grand opening event, hired staff, invested in marketing. A 3-week delay would cost them thousands of dollars and damage Hale Construction's reputation. After the inspector left, Lucas stood in the empty building, staring at the offending door, feeling the weight of his mistake crushing down on him. He'd been so careful, so thorough. How had he missed this? Ray found him there 20 minutes later. "Boss, I heard. I'm sorry. I should have caught it." "It's not your fault. I'm the site manager. I signed off on the installation." Lucas rubbed his face. "I have to tell Victoria." "She'll understand. Mistakes happen." "Do they?" "Because this isn't just any mistake, Ray. This is a major project, a huge client, and I screwed up because I wasn't paying attention." Lucas felt sick. "She's going to think I was distracted by our relationship, that I let personal feelings affect my professional judgment. That's not true, and you know it. You've been busting your ass on this project for months." "Doesn't matter. That's what people will think." Lucas headed for the door. "I need to talk to her. Now." The drive to the main office felt like driving to his own execution. Lucas rehearsed the conversation in his head, trying to find the right words to explain how he'd missed something so fundamental. By the time he reached Victoria's office, his shirt was damp with nervous sweat. Margaret took one look at his face and immediately buzzed Victoria. "Mr. Bennett is here. He says it's urgent." Victoria's door opened seconds later. She was on a phone call, but she took one look at Lucas's expression and cut the conversation short. "I'll call you back." She hung up, then gestured Lucas inside. "What happened?" Lucas closed the door and told her everything. The failed inspection, the incorrectly installed door, the 3-week delay for re-inspection. He watched Victoria's expression shift from concern to frustration to barely controlled anger. How did this happen? Her voice was carefully controlled, the CEO voice that meant she was furious. "You reviewed every phase of this project. You personally signed off on that installation." "I know. I have no excuse. I missed it, and now we're looking at a major delay and a very angry client." Lucas forced himself to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I'll fix this. Whatever it takes." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her jaw tight. "The client is going to demand compensation for the delay. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in penalties." "I know. This reflects poorly on the entire company, on our quality control, our attention to detail, our professionalism." "I know," Lucas repeated miserably. Victoria stood and walked to her window, staring out at the construction yard below. Lucas waited, his heart pounding, wondering if this was it. If this mistake would cost him not just his job, but his relationship too. Finally, Victoria turned back to him. "What's your plan to fix this?" "I'll call in every favor I have. See if I can get an emergency re-inspection scheduled sooner. In the meantime, we'll get that door replaced today. It'll be perfect when they come back." Lucas hesitated. "I'll cover the costs personally if needed. The penalty fees, the overtime for the crew. Don't be ridiculous. This is a company expense, not a personal one." Victoria sat back down at her desk, her fingers drumming that familiar pattern. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to fix that door today. Then you're going to call the city inspector's supervisor and explain the situation. Be honest, take responsibility, and see if they can fast-track a re-inspection. I'll contact the client and manage their expectations." "That's it? You're not—" Lucas stopped himself. "Not what? Firing you?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Lucas, you made a mistake, a significant one with real consequences. But you've also managed dozens of successful projects over the past 3 years. One mistake doesn't erase that track record. But people will say all kinds of things. Let them." Victoria's voice was firm. "I'm not going to punish you more harshly because we're together, and I'm not going to give you preferential treatment either. This is a professional mistake being handled professionally. That's it." Lucas felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You still have to fix this mess." Victoria picked up her phone. "Now go. I need to call the client before they hear about it from someone else." Lucas left her office feeling shaken but determined. He spent the rest of the day coordinating the door replacement, making phone calls, pulling strings. By evening, the door was fixed and he'd managed to schedule an expedited re-inspection for the following week. Not perfect, but better than 3 weeks. When he finally got home after 10 that night, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, he found Victoria and Mason at the kitchen table. Mason was working on math homework while Victoria prepared what looked like a very late dinner. "Dad!" Mason looked up. Victoria made spaghetti. The good kind with the sauce from a jar, not the boring kind you make. "Hey, buddy." Lucas kissed the top of Mason's head. "Sorry I'm so late." "It's okay. Victoria said you had an important problem to solve." Mason returned to his homework. "Did you solve it?" "Getting there, kiddo. Getting there." After Mason went to bed, Lucas and Victoria sat on their small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights. Neither spoke for several minutes, the silence heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Victoria said, "Are you okay?" "Honestly, I don't know." Lucas took a long drink of wine. "Part of me is relieved you didn't fire me. Part of me thinks you should have." "Why would I fire one of my best site managers over a single mistake?" "Because I'm sleeping with the boss. Because it looks bad. Because people are already gossiping about us. And now they'll say I only kept my job because we're together." Victoria set down her wine glass. "So what do you want to do? Break up to protect my company's reputation? Pretend the last 3 months didn't happen?" "No, I don't know." Lucas ran his hands through his hair. "I just don't want to be the reason people don't respect you. You've worked too hard for that." "Lucas, listen to me." Victoria turned to face him fully. "I've spent 15 years proving myself in this industry. 15 years of working twice as hard as my male competitors, of fighting for every contract, of earning respect inch by bloody inch. You think I'm going to let gossip or speculation undermine that? But nothing. Yes, we're together. Yes, that complicates things. But I'm still the CEO, and I still make decisions based on what's best for the company, not what's best for my personal life." Victoria's voice was steel now. "If you want to second-guess every professional decision I make because you're worried about what people think, then we have a bigger problem than a failed inspection." Lucas sat with that for a moment. She was right, of course. By questioning her decision to keep him on, he was essentially questioning her judgment, her integrity, her ability to separate personal and professional. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're right. I'm letting my own insecurity about this relationship affect how I see things. We're both navigating uncharted territory here." Victoria's voice softened. "But Lucas, I need you to trust me. Trust that I can handle my business and our relationship simultaneously. Trust that I wouldn't keep you on if I didn't believe in your abilities. I do trust you. It's myself I'm not sure about. We'll get sure. Because I need my partner, both at work and at home, to be confident in what we're building. Victoria took his hand. We're going to face challenges. Some from outside, some from our own doubts and fears. But we face them together, okay? No more assuming the worst. Lucas squeezed her hand. Together. I can do that. They sat in comfortable silence after that, the city humming below them, the November air cold but not unbearable. Lucas thought about his father's words from earlier, that sometimes good things just got to stay good. Maybe it was time to start believing that. The following week brought the re-inspection, which they passed with flying colors. The client was appeased with a modest discount and profuse apologies. The Morrison project opened only 5 days late, and the grand opening event was successful enough that the client was already talking about hiring Hale Construction for their next development. At the office, the gossip about Lucas and Victoria gradually faded into background noise, replaced by new dramas and developments. They filed the necessary HR paperwork declaring their relationship, endured one awkward meeting with the company's lawyer about conflict of interest policies, and generally proved that two professionals could maintain appropriate boundaries while being in love. At home, life settled into a comfortable rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Victoria learned Mason's routines and preferences, figured out which battles were worth fighting and which weren't. Mason taught Victoria about dinosaurs, ocean ecosystems, and the complex social dynamics of second-grade friendships. Lucas watched his family expand and found himself constantly amazed at how seamlessly the pieces fit together. One evening in late November, about a month before Christmas, Lucas came home from work to find Victoria and Mason in the living room surrounded by small plastic dinosaurs in various stages of completion. The 3D printer whirred in the corner, producing what looked like a Parasaurolophus. "What's all this?" Lucas asked, stepping over a Triceratops. "We're building a museum," Mason announced proudly. "Victoria helped me design display cases on the computer, and we're printing them. Then we're going to paint all the dinosaurs and make labels with their scientific names." "It's a comprehensive paleontology exhibit," Victoria added with mock seriousness. "We're planning to charge admission, $2 for adults, $1 for kids." "That's ambitious. Where's this museum going to be located?" "My room," Mason said. "Obviously. Where else would you put a dinosaur museum?" Lucas surveyed the chaos of his living room. Plastic dinosaurs, paint supplies, printed display cases in various sizes, and laughed. This was his life now, messy and unpredictable and full of projects he'd never imagined himself involved in. "Need any help?" he asked. "Can you paint?" Victoria held up a partially painted Stegosaurus. "Because I'm terrible at staying in the lines." "I can paint." Lucas sat down on the floor between them. "Hand me a brush." They spent the next 2 hours painting dinosaurs, Mason providing detailed information about each species while Victoria and Lucas tried not to get paint on the carpet. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. Later, after Mason was in bed, Lucas found Victoria in the bathroom brushing her teeth, paint still smudged on her cheek. "You've got green on your face," Lucas said, leaning against the doorframe. "Velociraptor green or Ankylosaurus green? Does it matter?" Mason would say yes. Victoria rinsed her mouth and examined her reflection. "How did I get paint in my hair?" "Artistic enthusiasm?" Lucas stepped closer, gently wiping the paint from her cheek with his thumb. "Thank you for today. For the dinosaur museum. For being so patient with him." "I'm not being patient. I'm having fun." Victoria turned to face him. "Mason's amazing, Lucas. He's curious and creative and kind. Spending time with him isn't a chore, it's a privilege." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I love you. I love you too. Even when you criticize my dinosaur painting skills. Your dinosaur painting skills are objectively terrible. And yet somehow Mason still thinks I'm cool." Victoria grinned. "I'm choosing to focus on that." They moved to the bedroom, the apartment quiet now except for the distant sound of the 3D printer still working on Parasaurolophus components. Lucas lay in bed watching Victoria move through her nighttime routine, removing her jewelry, changing into pajamas, setting her phone on the nightstand. Small, intimate details of shared life that he'd never thought he'd experience again. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked, sliding into bed beside him. How different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. How much has changed? Good, different, or bad different? Terrifying different, Lucas admitted. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to fall apart. I can't quite believe I get to keep this. Victoria propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the dim light. Lucas, I need you to hear me. Really hear me. This isn't going to fall apart. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to have problems and disagreements and difficult days, but I'm committed to working through them. All of them. How are you so sure? Because I've already thought about walking away, multiple times. Victoria's honesty surprised him. When things got complicated at work, when I worried about what people would think, when I wondered if I was ready for the responsibility of being part of Mason's life. I've had plenty of opportunities to leave. And every single time, the thought of leaving hurt worse than the thought of staying and facing whatever challenge we were dealing with. Victoria touched his face gently. You're not the only one who's scared, Lucas. But I'm more scared of losing this than I am of any difficulty we might face. Lucas pulled her down into a kiss, pouring into it all the gratitude and love and relief he felt. When they broke apart, Victoria settled against his chest, her breathing gradually slowing as she drifted towards sleep. Victoria? Lucas whispered. When I asked you to pretend to be my girlfriend at that reunion, I never imagined it would lead here. Where's here? Home. This is home. Like you and me and Mason. This is home. Victoria smiled against his chest. Best fake relationship ever. Best real relationship ever, Lucas corrected. As Victoria's breathing deepened into sleep, Lucas lay awake a while longer, listening to the sounds of his apartment, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the 3D printer still whirring in the living room, the quiet rhythm of Victoria's breathing beside him. Outside his window, the city continued its endless motion, indifferent to the small miracles happening in ordinary apartments. Lucas thought about Emma, about how much she would have loved Victoria's patience and enthusiasm for dinosaur museums. He thought about Olivia, hoping she'd found peace and happiness with David. He thought about the past 2 years of grief and survival, of learning to be both father and mother to Mason, of slowly rebuilding a life from ruins. And he thought about the future, uncertain and potentially difficult, but no longer terrifying, because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. He had Victoria beside him, committed and fierce and imperfect. He had Mason thriving and happy and secure. He had built something real from the wreckage of his old life. The fear was still there, lurking in quiet moments, whispering that happiness was temporary and loss was inevitable. But it was quieter now, less insistent. And for the first time in years, Lucas found himself believing that maybe, just maybe, good things really could stay good. He pulled Victoria closer, pressed a kiss to her hair, and finally let himself sleep. December arrived with the first real snowfall of the season, transforming the city into something softer and quieter. Lucas woke on the first Saturday of the month to find Mason's face inches from his own, the boy's breath warm and excited. "Dad, it snowed! Can we build a snowman? Can Victoria help? Can we go to the park?" Lucas groaned and checked the clock. 6:15 in the morning. "Buddy, it's too early. Go back to sleep for a little while." "But the snow might melt." "It's December. The snow's not going anywhere." Lucas felt Victoria shift beside him, her hand finding his under the covers. "Give us 1 more hour, okay? Then we'll make the biggest snowman you've ever seen." Mason considered this, then nodded and scampered out of the room. Lucas heard the TV turn on in the living room, volume mercifully low. "Your son has no concept of weekends," Victoria mumbled against his shoulder, her voice thick with sleep. "Our son," Lucas corrected gently, and felt Victoria smile against his skin. "Our son," she repeated, testing the words. "I like how that sounds." They lay there in the early morning dimness, the radiator clanking to life, the muted sounds of Saturday morning cartoons filtering through the door. Lucas traced lazy circles on Victoria's back, thinking about how quickly the extraordinary had become ordinary. Waking up beside her, Mason bursting in with his endless enthusiasm, the three of them navigating the small domestic details of shared life. It all felt as natural as breathing now. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked, her fingers tracing the scar on Lucas's shoulder from a construction accident years ago. How happy I am. How scared that makes me. Victoria propped herself up to look at him. Still? Even after everything? It's getting better, Lucas admitted. But sometimes I wake up and can't quite believe this is real. That you're here, that Mason's happy, that we're actually making this work. We are making it work. Victoria kissed him softly. And you know what? I think it's time we stopped waiting for disaster. I think it's time we started planning for a future instead of just surviving the present. Before Lucas could ask what she meant, Mason's voice carried from the living room. It's been an hour. Can we go now? Victoria laughed. That was maybe 20 minutes. Close enough for a 7-year-old. Lucas threw back the covers. Come on, let's go build a snowman before he stages a revolt. They bundled up in layers and headed to the park, Mason running ahead to claim the best spot for snowman construction. The park was already filling with families, children's laughter mixing with the quiet hush of falling snow. Lucas and Victoria worked together, rolling massive snowballs while Mason supervised, offering detailed instructions about proper snowman anatomy. The head needs to be smaller than the middle, Mason insisted, and we need rocks for buttons, not just random sticks. Aye, aye, Captain, Victoria said, saluting. Anything else? Yeah, he needs a name. You can't just make a snowman and not name him. What should we call him? Lucas asked, stacking the second snowball onto the first. Mason thought seriously about this. Frederick? Frederick the Snowman. Frederick it is. They spent the next hour perfecting Frederick, finding the right rocks for buttons, fashioned a carrot nose, and discovered the perfect stick arms. Other families worked on their own snow creations nearby, and Lucas found himself exchanging friendly nods with other parents, feeling part of a community he'd been isolated from for so long. Victoria proved surprisingly artistic, using smaller snowballs to give Frederick a proper hat shape. Mason contributed a tattered scarf from home, wrapping it around Frederick's neck with ceremony. There, Mason declared, stepping back to admire their work. Perfect. Lucas pulled out his phone and took a picture. Victoria and Mason on either side of Frederick, both grinning, snow-dusting their hair and shoulders. Looking at the image on his screen, Lucas felt his throat tighten. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not what he'd originally planned, but real and beautiful in his. Dad, come on! We need you in the picture too! Mason grabbed Lucas's hand and pulled him over, then asked a passing jogger to take a photo of all three of them. As they walked home later, Mason dragging behind to examine icicles forming on a fence, Victoria slipped her hand into Lucas's. I've been thinking about something, she said quietly. Yeah? About the future. About what comes next for us. Victoria glanced back to make sure Mason was out of earshot. I want to make this official, Lucas. Not just living together, but really committed, permanent. Lucas's heart began to race. Are you saying, I'm not proposing? Not yet, anyway. Victoria smiled. But I'm saying I want to start planning for that. For marriage, for formally becoming Mason's stepmother, if that's something he wants. For building a real future together. I want that too, Lucas said, surprised by how certain he felt. I've wanted it for weeks, but I was afraid to say anything. Afraid it was too soon. We've already been living like a married couple for 2 months. How much more soon does it need to be? Victoria squeezed his hand. I love you, Lucas. I love Mason. I love the life we're building. Why wait? Why wait indeed? Lucas pulled her close, kissing her despite Mason's inevitable gross from behind them. That evening, after dinner and homework and Mason's extensive bedtime routine, Lucas and Victoria sat on the couch with hot chocolate, planning. Not in detail, there was no rush, but in broad strokes. What their wedding might look like. When to tell Mason about their plans. How to navigate the complexity of Victoria becoming not just Lucas's partner, but Mason's legal guardian. He's going to be excited, Victoria said. Mason, I mean. He's been asking me lately if I'm going to stay forever. What did you tell him? That I'm not going anywhere unless he tells me to leave. Victoria set down her mug. He said I should stay because you're less grumpy when I'm around. Lucas laughed. Brutally honest, that kid. It's one of his best qualities. They fell into comfortable silence, the apartment warm and quiet around them. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. Lucas thought about how much had changed since that August afternoon at the reunion, how a desperate request born from fear and insecurity had transformed into something real and lasting. "Thank you," Lucas said suddenly. "For what?" "For saying yes. That first time at the reunion, for taking a chance on a nervous wreck who asked his boss to pretend to be his girlfriend." Victoria smiled. "Best decision I ever made." The next few weeks passed in a blur of holiday preparations. Mason's Dinosaur Museum was completed and formally opened with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by Lucas's mother and a few of Mason's school friends. Victoria helped him create professional-looking labels for each exhibit, complete with scientific names and fun facts. The admission fee was waived for the grand opening, though Mason made it clear that future visitors would be expected to pay. At work, the Henderson project wrapped up successfully, and Lucas was assigned to a new development, a mixed-use complex that would be Hale Construction's most ambitious project yet. Victoria appointed him lead site manager, and this time there were no whispers about favoritism. Lucas had proven himself through the Morrison crisis, demonstrating that he could handle pressure and fix mistakes with grace. Christmas approached, bringing with it the question of how to blend their different family traditions. Victoria had always spent holidays alone or with colleagues, while Lucas had maintained his mother's traditions even through the difficult years. They compromised, hosting Christmas Eve dinner at their apartment for Lucas's mother, while planning to spend Christmas Day quietly as their own small family. On Christmas Eve morning, Lucas woke to find Victoria already up, standing at the bedroom window watching snow fall over the city. She wore one of his old sweatshirts and her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked so perfectly at home in his space that Lucas felt his heart squeeze. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining her at the window. "Too excited, I think." Victoria leaned back against him. "I've never had this before. A real family Christmas. It's strange how nervous it makes me." "My mom's gonna love you. She already does." "I know. But this is different. This is me being officially part of your family, not just someone you're dating." Victoria turned to face him. "What if I mess up? Say the wrong thing? Don't know the traditions?" Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "Then you'll learn them. That's how traditions work. They're passed down and adapted and changed. You're not interrupting our family, Victoria. You're expanding it." Before Victoria could respond, Mason appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Santa came early. There are presents under the tree." "Those are from us, buddy," Lucas said. "Santa comes tonight, remember?" "Oh, right." Mason didn't look disappointed, though. "Can we open them now?" "After breakfast, and after you brush your teeth." Mason groaned but complied, and soon they were all gathered in the living room, the small Christmas tree Lucas and Mason had decorated last week twinkling with lights. They'd bought it together from a lot near the park, Mason insisting on the scrawniest tree on the lot, because it needed love more than the pretty ones. The pile of presents under that scraggly tree was modest but thoughtful. Lucas had gotten Victoria a first edition of her favorite book, something she'd mentioned wanting months ago. Victoria had gotten Lucas a new set of professional drafting tools, noticing his old set was worn out. And Mason received the advanced dinosaur encyclopedia he'd been coveting, along with a remote-controlled velociraptor that Victoria had special ordered from a specialty toy shop. But the gift that made Lucas's breath catch was the one Victoria handed to Mason last, a small envelope with his name on it in Victoria's careful handwriting. "What's this?" Mason asked, turning it over. "Open it and see." Mason tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He stared at it, confused, then looked up at Victoria. "I don't understand." Victoria knelt down beside him. "It's an adoption petition. It means I'm asking the court to let me legally become your mom, if that's something you want." The room went completely silent. Lucas felt tears prick his eyes as he watched Mason process this information. "You want to adopt me?" Mason's voice was small, uncertain. "Like, for real?" "For real. If you're okay with it." Victoria glanced at Lucas, who nodded encouragingly. "You'd still have your dad, obviously, and you'd still have all your memories of your biological mom. But I'd be your mom too, legally. We'd be a real family." Mason looked at the paper again, then at Victoria, then at Lucas. "Dad, is this okay?" "More than okay, buddy, if it's what you want." What if, Mason hesitated, what if I mess up? What if I'm bad and you change your mind? Victoria pulled Mason into her arms. That's not how love works, sweetheart. Parents don't stop being parents just because kids make mistakes. If I become your mom, I'm your mom forever. Through good days and bad days and everything in between. Mason was quiet for a long moment, and Lucas could see him working through emotions too big for his 7-year-old heart to fully process. Then, in a voice muffled against Victoria's shoulder, he said, I want you to be my mom. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Yeah? Yeah, but I have a question. Anything. Can I call you Mom, or do I have to call you Victoria? You can call me whatever feels right to you, Mom, Victoria, whatever you want. Mason pulled back to look at her seriously. I think I want to call you Mom. Is that weird? It's not weird at all. Victoria was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. I would be honored to be your mom. Lucas watched this exchange through his own tears, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past, not pretending Emma and Olivia never existed, but making room for new love alongside old memories. The rest of Christmas Eve passed in a warm blur. Lucas's mother arrived in the afternoon, took one look at the three of them, still slightly teary-eyed from the morning's gift, and immediately understood something significant had happened. When they told her about the adoption petition, she cried too, pulling Victoria into a fierce hug. Welcome to the family, sweetheart, she said, officially and permanently. They cooked dinner together, all four of them crowding into the small kitchen with too many cooks and not enough counter space. Mason appointed himself Victoria's assistant, carefully measuring ingredients under her direction while Lucas and his mother worked on side dishes. You did good, honey, Lucas's mother said quietly, while Victoria and Mason were occupied with the main course. Emma would be happy that Mason has someone like Victoria in his life. Lucas nodded, his throat too tight for words. His mother squeezed his arm and returned to chopping vegetables. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. The turkey slightly overcooked, the mashed potatoes a bit lumpy, the green beans swimming in too much butter. But nobody cared. They sat around Lucas's small dining table, extended with a folding card table to accommodate four, and talked and laughed and built memories. After Lucas's mother left, they put Mason to bed early so Santa could come, though he fought sleep with the determination of a child who knew something important was happening. Finally, around 9, he drifted off, one hand clutching the adoption petition paper he'd insisted on keeping. Lucas and Victoria sat up arranging the Santa gifts they'd hidden in their closet. More dinosaurs, a science kit, a new winter coat Mason desperately needed. They worked quietly, both aware of the significance of this moment. Their first Christmas Eve as a family, the first of many. Are you scared? Victoria asked as they filled stockings with candy and small toys. Terrified, Lucas admitted, but in a good way. The kind of scared that means something matters. Yeah, I know that feeling. Victoria placed the last gift under the tree and sat back. Lucas, I need to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for weeks. Lucas's stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Okay. That job offer in Chicago, the one I turned down? Victoria took a breath. They called again last week, increased the offer significantly, made it almost impossible to refuse from a business standpoint. Lucas felt the world tilt slightly. And I told them no, again, definitively this time. Victoria took his hand. Because I realized something. I spent 15 years building a company, and I'm proud of that. But I don't want to spend the next 15 years sacrificing everything personal for professional success. I want this, you and Mason and our little family. I want to build something here that matters more than any construction project ever could. Victoria, I can't be the reason you turn down opportunities. What if you regret it? What if I regret leaving you? Victoria countered. What if I spend the rest of my life wondering what our life could have been if I'd been brave enough to choose it? That scares me more than any professional regret ever could. Lucas pulled her close, holding her tight. I love you. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good. Be terrified with me. Victoria smiled against his shoulder. Let's be terrified together and build something amazing anyway. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the glow of Christmas lights, the apartment quiet around them. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, but inside their small home, everything was still and peaceful and exactly right. Christmas morning brought the chaos of a 7-year-old discovering Santa's gifts. Mason woke them at 5:30, practically vibrating with excitement, and they stumbled into the living room to watch him tear into packages with single-minded intensity. "Look, a Spinosaurus, and it's anatomically correct." Mason held up the dinosaur model with reverence. "Santa knows about scientific accuracy." "Santa's very educated," Victoria said, hiding a smile behind her coffee mug. They spent the morning in their pajamas building dinosaur models and reading the new encyclopedia and generally enjoying the kind of lazy Christmas morning that Lucas had dreamed of but thought he'd never experience again. No rushing to get to relatives' houses, no forced holiday cheer covering up grief, just simple contentment. Around noon, Mason looked up from his encyclopedia. "Mom?" He tried out the word carefully, watching Victoria's reaction. "Can we make cookies later? The dinosaur-shaped ones?" Victoria's eyes went bright with tears again. "Absolutely, sweetheart. We can make as many cookies as you want." Mason nodded, satisfied, and returned to his reading. Lucas caught Victoria's eye and mouthed, "Mom," and she smiled so wide her face looked like it might split. The rest of winter passed in comfortable routine. The adoption paperwork moved through the legal system with surprising efficiency, helped along by the fact that Olivia had willingly signed away her parental rights years ago when she'd left. In late February, they appeared before a family court judge for the final hearing. Mason wore his best clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that he complained made him look too fancy, and clutched Victoria's hand throughout the proceeding. The judge, a kindly older woman with reading glasses on a chain, reviewed the paperwork and asked Mason a few questions to confirm he understood what was happening. "Do you understand that if I approve this petition, Victoria Hale will be your legal mother?" the judge asked. "Yes, ma'am." Mason's voice was steady despite his nervousness. "She's already kind of my mom anyway. This just makes it official." The judge smiled. "That's a very mature way of looking at it. And you're happy about this?" "Very happy. Victoria's really nice, and she helps me with my dinosaur museum, and she makes better pancakes than my dad." "Hey," Lucas protested quietly, and the judge laughed. "Well, better pancakes are certainly grounds for adoption in my book." The judge signed the final papers with a flourish. "Congratulations. You're officially a family." The celebration afterward was small but heartfelt, just the three of them and Lucas's mother going out for ice cream despite the cold weather. Mason insisted on telling everyone they encountered that Victoria was officially my mom now, by law, which earned them congratulations from strangers and one free cookie from a particularly touched ice cream shop employee. That night, after Mason was asleep, Lucas and Victoria lay in bed talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. "So," Victoria said, "we should probably discuss the whole marriage thing at some point." "Probably," Lucas agreed. "Any thoughts on timing?" "Well, I'd like to actually be engaged first. Seems like the traditional order of operations." Lucas laughed. "Fair point, though I should warn you I'm terrible at romantic proposals. I'll probably mess it up." "I don't need romance. I just need sincerity." Victoria rolled over to face him. "Whenever you're ready, however you want to do it, I'll say yes, just so you know. That takes some of the pressure off." "Good. Pressure is overrated." They fell asleep tangled together, and Lucas dreamed of weddings and futures and the life they were building one ordinary day at a time. Spring arrived with the usual chaos, construction season ramping up, Mason's school schedule intensifying, the apartment feeling smaller as their combined possessions seemed to multiply. They started talking seriously about finding a bigger place, maybe a house with a yard where Mason could play and they could have space to breathe. One Saturday in early April, they drove out to look at houses in the suburbs. Mason had specific requirements: a backyard big enough for a swing set, a basement for his dinosaur museum, and proximity to his current school. Victoria wanted good natural light and a space she could use as a home office. Lucas just wanted something structurally sound that wouldn't need major repairs. The third house they looked at checked all the boxes: a modest 3-bedroom colonial with hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and a backyard that backed up to a small wooded area. Mason immediately ran outside to explore while Lucas and Victoria walked through the rooms, imagining their furniture in the space, their lives unfolding here. "We could afford this," Victoria said, reviewing the listing price. "With both our incomes, the mortgage would be manageable. It would be a longer commute to the office for both of us. But Mason would have space to grow. We'd have room for a real office, maybe a workshop for you." Victoria turned to look at him. "What do you think?" Lucas walked to the window overlooking the backyard where Mason was attempting to climb a sturdy oak tree. "I think this could be home." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They put in an offer that evening, and after some negotiation, it was accepted. Closing was scheduled for early June, which gave them 2 months to pack up the apartment, prepare Mason for the move, and generally panic about becoming homeowners together. On the last Saturday of May, 2 weeks before closing, Lucas took Mason to the park while Victoria met with the moving company. It was one of those perfect late spring days, warm but not hot, the trees in full bloom, the whole world feeling alive and new. They threw a football for a while, then sat on a bench near the playground eating ice cream from the truck that always parked by the basketball courts. "Dad?" Mason's voice was thoughtful. "Are you going to marry Mom?" Lucas nearly choked on his ice cream. "Why do you ask?" "Because Tyler's parents are married, and he says that's what people do when they love each other and live together." Mason took a bite of his chocolate cone. "You love Mom, right?" "Very much." "And she loves you?" "She does." "So you should probably get married." Mason said this with the simple logic of childhood. "Otherwise, it's weird." Lucas smiled. "You're right, buddy. We should probably get married." "When?" "Soon, I promise." Lucas ruffled Mason's hair. "How would you feel about that, about me marrying Victoria?" Mason thought about this seriously. "Good, I think. She's already my mom, so she might as well be your wife too. That way we're all together officially." "That's exactly right." Lucas felt a surge of affection for his son, for his ability to see things so clearly. "Mason, I want you to know something. Even though we're adding Victoria to our family, you're still my #1 priority. Always." "I know, Dad." Mason finished his ice cream and wiped his hands on his shorts. "But I think it's good that you have Mom now, too. You were sad for a long time. You're not sad anymore." Lucas's throat tightened. "No, buddy, I'm not sad anymore." When they returned home, Lucas found Victoria in their bedroom, sorting through old photos and papers. She looked up as he entered, her expression uncertain. "I found these in the back of your closet," she said, gesturing to a box of photos from Lucas's life with Olivia and Emma. "I wasn't snooping. I was just looking for that sweater I lent you, and it's okay." Lucas sat beside her, looking at the photographs spread across the bed. Emma's 4th birthday party, a family trip to the beach. Olivia and Lucas on their wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unprepared for what was coming. "I didn't know you kept all these," Victoria said quietly. "I couldn't throw them away. Emma's whole life is in here. And Olivia and I had good years before everything fell apart. I didn't want Mason to grow up thinking his whole history was painful." Victoria picked up a photo of Emma, a candid shot of her laughing, gap-toothed and joyful. She was beautiful. She was. Lucas took the photo, studying his daughter's face. "I used to be afraid that loving you meant forgetting her, but I've realized that's not how it works. The heart has room for all of it, past and present, grief and joy, memory and hope. I never want you to forget her." Victoria's voice was fierce. "Or feel like you have to hide this part of your life from me. Emma is part of Mason's story, which makes her part of our story too." Lucas pulled Victoria close, overcome with love for this woman who understood that moving forward didn't mean erasing the past. They sat there together, sorting through the photos, Lucas sharing stories about Emma that Victoria had never heard. It felt like an important ritual, introducing Victoria to the full truth of his history, making space for all the parts of his life to coexist. That evening, after Mason was asleep, Lucas made a decision. He'd been carrying the engagement ring in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. But sitting there with Victoria, surrounded by photographs of his past and present, Lucas realized there was no such thing as a perfect moment. There was just life, messy and imperfect and real. "Victoria," he said, pulling out the small velvet box. I need to ask you something. Victoria looked at the box, then at Lucas's face, her eyes going wide. Lucas, I know this isn't romantic. We're sitting in our bedroom in our old apartment wearing sweatpants, and I don't have a speech prepared. But I love you. I love the life we've built together. I love watching you with Mason. I love that you make terrible pancakes and organize my tools and don't mind dinosaur museums taking over the living room. Lucas opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. Will you marry me? Victoria was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, obviously yes. Did you really think I might say no? I hoped you wouldn't. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. But it's nice to hear it anyway. Victoria kissed him fiercely, and for several minutes they didn't talk at all. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Victoria held up her hand to admire the ring in the lamplight. It's perfect, she said. Simple and elegant. How long have you been carrying this around? 2 weeks. I kept waiting for the right moment, but then I realized the right moment was just whenever I stopped being scared enough to ask. I'm glad you stopped being scared. Victoria settled against his chest. When should we tell Mason? Tomorrow. I think he's already figured it out anyway. Kid's too smart for his own good. They stayed up late making plans, talking about wedding details, discussing whether they wanted something big or small, debating the merits of spring versus fall ceremonies. Eventually they agreed on simple, a small wedding in their new backyard once they moved in, just close friends and family, nothing fancy or complicated. I want Mason to be part of it, Victoria said. Not just attending, but participating. This is about all three of us becoming a family. He'd like that. Maybe he could be the ring bearer? Perfect. When they finally went to sleep, Lucas felt a completeness he hadn't experienced in years. All the broken pieces of his life had somehow arranged themselves into something whole and beautiful. Not perfect. There would still be challenges and difficulties and days when old griefs resurfaced, but real and lasting and worth everything it had taken to get here. The next morning, they told Mason over breakfast. He reacted exactly as Lucas had predicted, with excitement and immediate questions about whether there would be cake and if he could wear a suit and when exactly this was happening, because Tyler's parents had gotten married last summer and it had been super boring, so theirs needed to be less boring. We'll do our best to make it not boring, Victoria promised. Any suggestions? Dinosaurs, Mason said immediately. We should have dinosaur decorations. Of course, Lucas said dryly. What was I thinking? A wedding without dinosaur decorations is clearly unacceptable. I'm serious, Dad. Dinosaurs make everything better. Victoria caught Lucas's eye and smiled. You know what? He's right. Dinosaurs it is. The move to the new house happened in mid-June. A coordinated chaos of boxes and furniture and last-minute discoveries of items they'd forgotten they owned. Mason claimed the bedroom with the best natural light for his dinosaur museum, while Lucas and Victoria took the master bedroom with its view of the backyard. Their first night in the new house, they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes and wondering where they'd put the plates. But it felt like an adventure, like the beginning of something important. To new beginnings, Victoria said, raising her can of soda in a toast. To family, Lucas added, clinking his can against hers. To dinosaurs, Mason contributed, and they all laughed. The wedding was planned for late August, giving them time to settle into the house and prepare properly. True to his word, Mason was heavily involved in the planning, insisting on Brachiosaurus centerpieces and vetoing Victoria's initial choice of flowers in favor of prehistoric-themed decorations. As August approached, Lucas found himself surprisingly calm. No cold feet, no panic, no last-minute doubts. Just steady certainty that he was making the right choice, building the right future, with exactly the right person. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for a backyard ceremony. Lucas stood in the upstairs bedroom, adjusting his tie for the 15th time, while Ray served as his unofficial best man and provided running commentary. You look fine, boss. Stop fussing. I just want everything to be perfect. It will be. Victoria's marrying you. The kid's excited. You've got a house and a life and everything you wanted. What could go wrong? You just jinxed it, Lucas muttered, but he was smiling. Downstairs, about 40 people had gathered in the backyard. Lucas's mother, Victoria's colleagues, friends from the construction company, a few of Mason's school friends, and their parents. The ceremony space was decorated with Mason's insisted upon dinosaurs, but Victoria had somehow made them elegant, mixing the prehistoric theme with flowers and lights, in a way that was whimsical rather than childish. The ceremony itself was simple. Lucas and Victoria had written their own vows, and they stood under an arch made of flowering branches while Mason stood between them, holding the rings. When it was Lucas's turn to speak, he looked at Victoria and felt his prepared words fly out of his head. Instead, he spoke from the heart. 6 months ago, I asked you to pretend to be my girlfriend because I was scared to face my past alone. You said yes, even though it was ridiculous. And in saying yes to that small favor, you changed everything. You showed me that life after loss was possible, that I could be a father and a partner, that opening my heart again wouldn't destroy me. Lucas's voice cracked slightly. You chose us, Victoria, when you could have taken the easier path, when you could have protected yourself from the complications of loving someone with a kid and a history and more baggage than any reasonable person should take on. You chose us anyway, and I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice. Victoria was crying openly, not bothering to hide it. When it was her turn, she looked at both Lucas and Mason before speaking. I spent 15 years building a company, proving myself, succeeding by every professional measure. But I was lonely, and I didn't even know it. Then Lucas walked into my office with an impossible request, and I said yes because something told me he was worth the risk. She squeezed Lucas's hand. You taught me that success isn't just about what you build professionally. It's about who you build a life with. Lucas Mason, you're my greatest achievement. Being part of this family is the best thing I've ever done. I promise to love you both fiercely, to show up even when it's hard, to make terrible pancakes and help with dinosaur museums and be present for all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make a life. The officiant, a friend of Victoria's who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this, pronounced them married, and Lucas kissed his wife while their guests applauded and Mason made exaggerated gagging sounds that made everyone laugh. The reception was relaxed and joyful. Good food, better company, toasts that were heartfelt without being maudlin. Lucas's mother cried happy tears and told Victoria she was the best thing that had ever happened to her son. Ray gave a speech about how Lucas had been insufferable for months because he was so obviously in love but trying to hide it. Mason presented them with a hand-drawn picture of their family, including several dinosaurs because every family portrait needs dinosaurs. As the sun set and fairy lights twinkled overhead, Lucas found himself standing at the edge of the celebration, just watching. Mason was playing with his friends, running around the backyard in his suit jacket. Victoria was talking with his mother, both women laughing about something. His found family, all gathered in the backyard of the home they'd chosen together. Victoria appeared at his elbow, slipping her hand into his. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How different my life is now. Better different? So much better. Lucas pulled her close. Thank you for saying yes. That first time and every time after. Thank you for asking. Victoria smiled up at him. So, Mr. Bennett, what do we do now? Lucas looked at their backyard full of people they loved, at Mason's dinosaur decorations swaying in the evening breeze, at the house they'd filled with their combined lives. He thought about the future stretching ahead, ordinary days and extraordinary moments, challenges they'd face together, joy they'd build from the ruins of what came before. Now, Lucas said, kissing his wife's forehead, now we live. We wake up tomorrow and make breakfast and help Mason with his homework. We go to work and come home to each other. We have good days and hard days and everything in between. We just live together. That sounds perfect. And it was. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense. There would still be arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes, mornings when they were too tired to be patient, moments when old griefs resurfaced unexpectedly. But perfect in the way real life could be when built on foundation of love and commitment and choosing each other every single day. As the celebration continued around them, Lucas and Victoria stood together, watching their family and friends celebrate the life they'd built from a fake relationship and a simple request for help. Sometimes, Lucas thought, the bravest thing you could do was ask for what you needed. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the right person said yes. Mason ran over, breathless from playing. Dad! Mom! Come dance! They're playing the dinosaur song! There's a dinosaur song? Lucas asked, bewildered. I requested it. Mason grabbed both their hands. Come on. And so Lucas and Victoria found themselves dancing in their backyard to a silly song about dinosaurs, Mason between them, all three of them laughing until they couldn't breathe. Later, they'd cut cake and open gifts and eventually send their guests home. They'd collapse into bed exhausted and happy, officially married and officially a family in every way that mattered. But for now, they just danced. Three people who'd found each other through chance and choice, who'd built something real from broken pieces, who'd learned that sometimes the best things in life started with a simple question and someone brave enough to say yes. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and full of possibility. But Lucas wasn't afraid anymore. He had Victoria beside him, Mason between them, and love enough to face whatever came next. That was more than enough. That was everything.